Mr. Mkwena. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, Chair.
Good morning, Mr. Jonas. Thank you. Just before you say anything, Mr. Mkwena, we have started a little later than we should have. In the main, I think that's because of me. I arrived at about 25 past, which left 5 minutes for council to see me, so that had I arrived a little earlier, much earlier, we would have been able to start on time. So I apologize for that. Yes, Mr. Mkwena.
Thank you, Chair. The Chair, today will be proceeding with the testimony of Mr. Jonas. As a reminder to ourselves, Mr. Jonas will be completing his evidence, focusing mainly on the terms of reference 1.1, 1.2, and 1.3. And subsequent to that, he will then be cross-examined by the legal teams of Mr. Duduzane Zuma, as well as Mr. Fana Shongwani, who were granted leave to cross-examine Mr. Jonas. You will also recall, Mr. Chair, that Mr. Jonas testified on the 24th of August 2018. At that time, he was not afforded an opportunity to react to the versions of the implicated parties, which only came after his testimony. And it is for that reason that he is here today to complete that evidence and to also proffer his own version in relation to what the implicated parties are saying in their Rule 3.4 applications. Mr. Chair, the legal teams of both Mr. Jonas and Mr. Duduzane Zuma are currently present. Maybe I should afford them an opportunity to place themselves on record.
Yes, thank you.
May it please you, Chair, my name is Vim Tengo. I appear for the witness, instructed by Attorneys Norton.
Thank you, Mr. Trengo.
Mr. Chair, I'm Pete Lowe, and I appear with Mr. Hubert to my left on instructions from Mrs. Krause and van der Merwe to his left.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, we are ready to proceed. May the witness be sworn in?
Yes, please do that, Registrar.
Please state your full names for the record.
Mcebisi, Jonas.
Do you have any objections to taking the prescribed oath?
No.
Do you consider the oath to be binding on your conscience?
Yes, I do.
Do you say that the evidence you give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, please raise your right hand and say, "So help me God."
Help me God.
Thank you. You may proceed, Mr. Mkwena.
Mr. Jonas, the last time when we parted ways, there were some assignments which were given to you to undertake. And let me remind you, the first assignment that you were supposed to do was to read the transcript of the public protector containing your interview with the public protector. The second assignment which you were supposed to do was to read the different versions of the implicated parties in order to afford you an opportunity to react to those versions. And the third assignment arises from the questions which were posed by the chair. When you testified, you informed the chair that there was general hostility towards the Minister of Finance and the Department of Finance or the Treasury, and the chair requested you to ponder around that evidence and for you to give much more details. And lastly, I will canvass with you a specific issue that arises from your interview with the public protector before being handed over for cross-examination. Do you recall that those were the 4 main assignments which you were required to undertake?
Yes, I do.
Yes. Now, let's deal with the first assignment. Did you have an opportunity to peruse the transcript of your interview with the public protector?
Yes, I did, Chair.
Does it fairly record the substance of your interview with her?
Generally consistent with the conversation. I must also add that it was a free-flowing conversation, guided by the questions raised.
Yes. Are there any serious inaccuracies which you may wish to highlight to the chair arising from that transcript?
No major inconsistencies. Probably there are a few grammatical and spelling errors, like Luanda is spelled wrongly.
Yes.
But generally, I think the content remains.
But you're happy with the substance and the content, at least.
Generally, the substance reflects the conversation.
Now, let's deal with the second issue which you were required to undertake. On the 24th of August 2018, you testified before the commission. You told the chair that there was that general hostility towards the Minister of Finance and the department itself by some of the executive members. You were requested to reflect on that evidence, Mr. Jonas, and to provide more details on that topic. Are you ready to do so?
I am ready, Chair.
Yes. Could you please proceed, Mr. Jonas?
Essentially, I'll probably focus on a few points just to underline and underscore the importance of and the effect of that hostility. Firstly, I think we must understand the hostility as arising in the very nature of Treasury and the Minister of Finance.
Maybe before you proceed, it would help to indicate upfront whether what you said was hostility towards the Minister of Finance or hostility towards the Ministry of Finance or hostility towards National Treasury. I seem to have understood it was National Treasury, but yes. I'm just mentioning this so that you appreciate the importance of making it clear as to who the hostility was directed at.
It was directed primarily at Treasury, but also at the Ministry of Finance. So I'll navigate in and out.
Yes, both. No, that's fine, that's fine.
So I think the first is to understand that the hostility is probably inherently embedded in the very constitutional and legal role that Treasury has to play. Now, you have many government departments. Treasury is probably the only department where it is, constitutionally determined what its role should be. Now, part of that role entails managing budget and managing fiscal, which means managing generally fiscal allocation and expenditure. It also managing revenue generally, but it also relates to managing macroeconomic policy. And these are all probably sensitive issues, and I'll try to show that later.
Yes.
Now, inherent in that responsibility is always an ever-existing possibility of people raising concerns about what Treasury does or the implications of Treasury on their work. I'll give a few examples to illustrate the point. Yes. The first would be, there was a time when expenditure of provinces went through the roof. They were overspending hugely. The Free State, at some point, the Department of Health was a runaway train, and the Eastern Cape and different other provinces were facing the same problem. Essentially, the role of Treasury was actually to step in and try to manage that and block that and redirect expenditure and refocus those provinces, but also build capacity in some instances. Now, if you look at the political landscape in the country, and I always say that we are in a state where there is no national leadership. You have provincial leadership playing national role, essentially. Because what you find in ministers and probably everybody that you see, they tend to be in the national executives and in national government because they have been supported by provinces. So over the last 10 years, the importance of provinces has grown so tremendously. That actually naturally opens up the Treasury to hostility at a political level both in the political organization, but also generally from all sorts of angles and provinces, etc. I'll use another second example just to demonstrate this. Treasury manages, amongst other things, borrowing, government borrowing. Now, the formula for government borrowing is such that you must not break the fiscal ceiling, basically. You can't borrow to a point where you can't pay. And in fact, South Africa, as we stand, has a crisis of debt already. So you had examples. I'll take the Department of Water, and for that matter, most ministers in the Department of Water had this novel idea of having a dam in the Eastern Cape. They call Mcebisi Dam in the Eastern Cape. And all of them, I think, which probably at different times it ranged between 20 billion and 30 billion. Now, obviously, I mean, at different points, as Treasury, you have to step in and say, how do you finance that? And sometimes more enthusiastic ministers will say, no, we spoke to China. They will give us the 30 billion, and we'll sort out.
They'll talk to who?
They have spoken to China.
Oh.
The government of China. They will give us the 30 billion and we'll sort it out. And effectively, you have to as Treasury, you have to say to them, by the way, there's a process of borrowing. It entails the following steps. So because of that misunderstanding generally about the role of Treasury, generally people respond with hostility to Treasury. Okay, that's the first point. I could give a number of other examples. I'm trying to be brief, but that's the first point. The second point I think I would raise around the hostility is, can I call it, for lack of a better word, the political and ideological context, which is probably...
Can you explain what you mean by that?
I'm about to get into that.
Yes.
And I think if you look at our notions of transformation, our notions of the state, our notion of service delivery as politically and in South Africa at the moment, they all lend to an expansive fiscal framework, basically. So in other words, most of the things that we say we want to do, I mean, whether it's transformation, whether it's service delivery, everything else, it does, in a sense, the thrust of it is an expansive fiscal framework. Now, this is easy. I mean, if your economy is growing and therefore you have, in a sense, revenue, because you can easily fund your expansive growth. The problem is that since 2012, our economy has not been growing. And in fact, if you look at our figures, we've been continuing the trend of spending in that space. So located in Treasury, you are essentially seen as the one who holds back this whole process. And I want to give an example again on this point just to illustrate it. There was a huge debate. I understand that some people add the thing. There was a huge debate that says, take away the budget office from Treasury to the presidency. Now, the more, if you look at a more naive explanation was because expenditure is not aligned to the National Development Plan. That was if you look at the simplistic explanation. But at the core of that injunction was an understanding that you need to place it at a point where regulation is not taken seriously. So ultimately the law says the financial regulatory responsibility ultimately sits with the Minister of Finance. So I mean the idea was that, so we had a whole process by the way, that runs from the cabinet right into the ANC structures, where people were saying you need to restructure, and the restructuring must actually take the budget office into the presidency.
What time period are you talking about there, more or less? The years?
It's actually, it happened over an extended period. I mean, before I got fired, or I probably, that was the time when they had a document to outline this,
Yes.
How that was to happen.
All right.
And it led, by the way, it led to a lot of senior officials in Treasury leaving Treasury because they thought it's absurd. You have to, the Constitution says you manage expenditure and revenue. On the other hand, you have a policy that says you are taking away budgeting from you, which is a constitutionally assigned responsibility, as it were.
I'm sorry, it might be difficult to answer this, but maybe you can if you are able to. Did this idea emanate from within the governing party, or did it emanate from within different structures of government?
It emanated from government, but then it went into party structures, and people started
Okay.
talking about that and had
Okay.
the regulation. Now, this was very useful, I mean, by the way, because if you manage budget, this thing of state capture becomes very easy. I mean, it becomes easy to discharge and dispense with resources. But the third point, and I'm raising this point very cautiously, Chair, in all respects, because I think I've been grappling with raising it because, in part, I'm actually asking myself, is it within the ambit of the commission? But I think it's fundamentally important in understanding state capture and corruption in our system. And this is again, for lack of a better word, is the overall developmental framework of South Africa. Can I put it differently? Some people will use the term the growth strategy. Some people will say the accumulation strategy, whatever term you use. I want to simplify it, I mean, the way I understand it. It essentially, I mean, and again, it's embedded in the deal we made in '94. If you look at the deal and cut out the frills of where the best constitution and everything else, and cut them out, it essentially entails the following. One, it's a deal that says, ensure that the established elite remains protected. You don't disrupt it. And I mean, you understand why, because it's crucial for continuing with growth and everything else. So you have instruments like protection of property rights and all of other things that you use to do that. The second element of it is also about ensuring that you strengthen the new elite. Again, you kind of use all sorts of instruments to build and strengthen and grow the new elite. So that's why you have BEE policies, you issue licenses, mining licenses, and you do all other procurement, public procurement, to actually bolster that, as it were. The third element is ensure that the working class, the underclass, and the poor are serviced through redistribution. Now, that's the model that we have, if you think about it. Now, looked at it differently, it is a patronage model, because you're actually dispensing patronage across these three layers effectively. But that model depends effectively on three things to work. One, it depends on a strong state and an efficient state. So in a state that is able to manage resources very well and dispense them more efficiently. But secondly, it also depends on growth. Because, I mean, without growth, then you won't be able to do the things. The third one is revenue, consistent revenue that you have. Now, what you see now, I think, in many ways, what has come to happen particularly over the last 10 years, has been that model unraveling. It unravels because your state is weak and sometimes consciously weakened. I mean, if you think about the ESCOMs and the SOEs, I mean, what has been happening in SOEs, but growth has not happened. And therefore, you don't have the revenue to service this. Now, the manner in which it unravels, it also means you have tensions across all those three layers that you normally service and support. I mean, you start having, at the bottom, people start talking about, we need more houses, we need more this, and you have like the new elite also rumbling that transformation is not happening at the pace that it's supposed to happen. Procurement is still skewed to white companies, etc., 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 etc. And that's the crisis. Now, if you, and for me, that's the basis, the structural basis of corruption and state capture in the current context. It is the unraveling of this model that we have, so to speak. So you take a case in point then, you have then somebody at ESCOM saying we need to procure to companies that are 51% black and coal from companies that are 51% black. I mean, the fact that, of course, they end up being Guptas, that's another story. But essentially then that you can easily say that because the atmosphere is incensed. And people are not looking at the structural issues, they are looking at the challenges and they are facing. Inequality is rising, jobs are not there because of the unraveling of the model. Now, we could use a couple of other examples to show the impact of that. But it also means that racism becomes bigger, stronger, because people start looking at, okay, who owns more? And people start thinking about, they happen to be white. And you have all sorts of other things. Tribalism, by the way, rises because people start saying, if you stay in a particular province, you get more, etc., etc. So it is an unraveling of this. Why am I saying all this? Because, again, the hostility on Treasury arises out of that. Because the response is normally a populist response, to say spend and spend and spend. Sitting in Treasury, then your role is to say, we can't spend the money that we don't have. And that naturally creates all sorts of problems for Treasury, as it were. But I'm also raising it to say that it will be a miss of the Commission not to talk about growth issues at some point, not to look at these kind of growth issues, these developmental challenges, because ultimately they are embedded in the narrative that we are currently dealing with, Chair, about state capture and so on and so on. The last 2 points, Chair, I won't be long, is what I would call the political system that we have. Now, and I'll be crude and less sophisticated in articulating it. Essentially, what you have, I mean, in our system, if you kind of cut out the frills again, you have a particular relationship between the state and the party. Now, firstly, you go into elections and elect a party. And normally, once the party gets elected, of course, the party goes to its own conference. Once it goes to its own conference, it takes power in provinces, it takes to provincial executives, in national, it takes it to the national executive. Ultimately, the power then gets taken to the working committee, and at a later point, then power gets taken to another committee, the top 6. Then later on, it gets taken to the president, basically. Now, effectively, what it actually means is that, again, I don't know whether this is in the ambit of the Commission, but I think ultimately, you're going to have a problem where capturing the party is the easy vehicle of capturing the state, because the relationship between the party and the state is there's no kind of lines that are as strong as you would want to have. So again, part of, I think, again, I'm being upfront, part of the things that I think as we think constructively about this is actually to revisit our political system, particularly how do we draw a wall between the political party and the state? And how do we build institutions of the state that go beyond political cycles, like election cycles, for instance, and so on and so on. And there's a clear example. Institutions in South Africa that have survived, it's because they are not linked to political cycles. The judiciary survives. It survives simply because it's not, when you have a new president, you don't jump and fire all judges, etc. I wish you could do that, but you don't do that.
Well, it's good that we know your wish, Mr. Jonas.
No, that was a joke. The same with the Reserve Bank. You don't change government. There's no change of government. You fire the Reserve Bank, as it were. But all those institutions that are like that have been durable. Now think about it. Most institutions where the minute you have a new minister walking in, they have to change, have become unsustainable. And in fact, they've been part of a problem, as it were. So part of, I think, the thinking around this separation should be about how do you kind of effectively separate the state from the political party? How do you build institutions that, not just institutions, some of them macroeconomic institutions, some of them economic institutions. I mean, SARS, for instance. It will be a sad story that you have a SARS that links with, it's linked with political cycle. DGs get fired when new minister comes in, by the way. I mean, if you look at the turnover of DGs, it's a normal case. Boards are fired because you have a new minister. And so those are the kinds of things that I would think that in exploring solutions to this problem we need. My last point, Chair, is that we have in South Africa an over-personalized political system. Our politics are so over-personalized that we hardly talk structural issues. That's why we can't resolve these issues of racism. Is nice if it's said by Mcebisi, Jonas, or somebody else. I mean, if somebody else says racist remarks, we tolerate because of the personality. But even our political cycles, I mean, we kind of, and that's why I think the danger, I would still argue, with the process of state capture is, can I use the term to over-Zumanize it? To think that it was about Zuma. That would be a biggest mistake. Because it is bigger, it is structural, it is systemic. Because you will miss the point, I mean, if you do that. And again, I mean, because whether you can have, I mean, there's an interesting story, somebody talking to a chief in one country of the president, and he asked the chief of the president, he was asking the chief of the president, are you worried that you have a new president in your country because your menu might change? So this guy responded, he says, actually, I'm not worried because normally the visitors are the same. So effectively, what I'm saying is that I think we must also avoid a danger where we don't look at the structural issues. We don't give attention to them. And fortunately, I think looking at where things are going presently in the country, it seems there is a focus on trying to resolve them. I think there's something that we need to say around how do you decouple our politics and structures from personalities and actually make them embedded in the system. I'm sorry for being long.
No, it was important, but certainly some of the points you have made, are points that I have raised with some of the people, particularly ministers or past ministers or present ministers, to say, when this commission looks at the issues that it must look at, one of the things that it must do is to ask the question, what is the environment that made it easy for certain things to happen? And it may well be that we must look at what our political or constitutional arrangements are, because it may well be that some of them made it easy for certain things to happen. And if we are looking at taking measures to make sure that, for example, state capture never happens again, and we don't address those things, whatever measures we might come up with might not assist. And in that regard, one of the things one looks at is what structures and what bodies and what functionaries were supposed to take certain steps once they realized that certain things were happening. And if they didn't take those steps, what is it that held them back? Because certainly, if I conclude in the end that there was state capture, I will have to look at why certain bodies, or what role certain bodies may have played in either facilitating it or in looking away and not doing what they should have done. And in this regard, it may well be that one must think about the oversight function of Parliament. Did Parliament play the kind of role that it was supposed to play? The governing party is not a statutory body, but in our system, it has an important role to play. Is there something that it ought to have done? Did it do it? And if it didn't do it, why? Is there an environment, or is there something in our systems that made it possible or that prevented it from doing what maybe it ought to have done? So I think part of what you say raises those issues, and I think they are very important issues. I don't know whether you want to say anything or...
Thank you, Chair. I agree, Chair, wholeheartedly. That's probably the direction we should be taking.
No, thank you very much.
Mr. Jonas, you have raised very important issues, which I have no doubt that the Chair will take into consideration when he ultimately makes his recommendations. However, to sum up on this issue, just before you were fired, are you able simply to sum up for us the type of hostility that you experienced within Treasury?
Again, I mean, I think we're at a point where before we kind of, and I'm probably talking for most of the officials and myself and the minister, before we even attend any meeting of government, we used to kind of think very hard about what's likely to come out. Because I think it was becoming, and I think it was, most of it centered around the nuclear, and I mean particularly the nuclear deal. But it also centered around issues of expenditure management, and the other more difficult one was the revenue management, and just to ensure that revenue comes in and so on and so on. And so the tension was almost, I mean, reaching a personal proportions, basically. I mean, it was, I mean, I was surprised recently. I went to some function and I saw some ministers and they hugged me and greeted me. So I said, wow. Because I think there's a time when you felt like we were ostracized, and it was almost palpable. It's not like ostracized in a subtle manner that people will greet you. We're ostracized in a palpable manner, in a sense. And the pressure on officials meant that also we're like worried about almost teetering at the brink of losing most of the technical capacity that we had in Treasury at the time. So it was at a personal level very serious. I mean, I think at a personal level very serious. And when I say serious to a point where I think some of us were even worried for our lives, actually. I mean, because it was real, it was very serious. I mean, the way it was panning out to be. And it was also, I mean, I remember that there were also investigations on ministers and investigations by this and this and this and this. And I was listening, I mean, if you watch some of these things, there were intelligence was being used to pursue some of the people, and I think the intelligence report that came out now shows that that was real. It was not just imagined. I see that some of the witnesses quoted the big intelligence report that depicted Treasury to be what it was and what it was not, by the way. And I think we were also, by the time we got fired, I think, again, there was some intelligence report used to fire us, saying that, I think I remember they said we're going to go and mobilize against the country, et cetera, et cetera. So, in summary, I think the pressure was like at the personal level, at a professional level, very palpable. I think the most excruciating experience being the whole charging of Minister Godam. And I'm not arguing about the content of that, but I'm just saying the whole process that we went through in that process was probably, it reminded me of the apartheid era, basically. I mean, the way it was so vicious. It was so vicious, absolutely vicious, as it were.
Where was this pressure coming from?
Look, I mean, it's clear, it was clear, I mean, at all different points. I mean, clearly, I mean, as we mentioned in my earlier submission, I think I mentioned that you apart from being constitutionally mandated to do A, B, C, D, your success relies on political support. And political support by the head of state. So if you don't have that, I mean, forget. I mean, and quite frankly, I would advise any Minister of Finance that doesn't have that must just resign, because it doesn't work. It just doesn't work, I mean, as it were. So that was one part of it. But the security apparatuses were, in how they were looking at Treasury, was not fun. It was so bad in that period.
Yes.
Of course, it might be something that should be taken as normal that if any minister doesn't have political support, they should resign. But based on the evidence that has been given by previous ministers of finance, I think including you, at a certain stage, if some or other Minister of Finance had resigned, some people would say another minister might have been put in who might not have been seen to be one that would be strict with regard to compliance with regulations and legislation and so and policies, and that may have resulted in certain problems for the country economically and financially.
I would say yes. I mean, in part that's true, but again, I mean, I'm saying we had a long debate in Treasury at some point. I mean, in one strategic planning session, and my attitude was that we were essentially stalling or slowing down the pace of destruction. Essentially, I mean, that's what we're doing. And because, I mean, where we're located, you could manage how expenditure is done, you could do all of those things. So it helped, I mean, to a certain extent. But imagine if we didn't reach a point where society get alarmed about what was happening and acted and so on and so on. So if we didn't reach that point, would we, and we're not fired, would we be still trying to play that role? Personally, as Mcebisi Jonas, I wouldn't.
Thank you.
Now let's move to the third assignment that you are required to do. At the time when you testified, Mr. Jonas, you were not afforded an opportunity to react to the versions of the implicated parties. Mr. Duduzane Zuma and Mr. Fana Shongwane has since applied to cross-examine you, and they have finished the chair with their versions in terms of Rule 3.4. And they were subsequently also granted leave to cross-examine you. May I refer you to an exhibit before you? You'll see it's marked Exhibit D3. If you look at the spine of the file, you'll be able to easily locate it. Now, let me assist you to navigate that file and only refer you to the relevant portions which we will be canvassing. The affidavit of Mr. Nhlanhla Nene commences from page 57, and it runs up until page 67. And the affidavit of Mr. Duduzane Zuma runs from page 171 to page 177. For completeness, Mr. Jonas, what I'll do also, I will refer you to the affidavit of Mr. Ajay Kumar Gupta, which is on page 165. It runs up until 170 for you to be able to react to some of the allegations that he says about you. And I will also refer you to the affidavit of Mr. Rajesh Kumar Gupta, which you will locate on page 178, and it runs up until page 181. Even though they were not afforded the right to cross-examine, but it's important for you to react to some of the specific allegations which are made about you in those affidavits. Now, if we may start with the one of Mr. Nhlanhla Nene on page 59. Without having to read the contents, you'll see that from paragraph 3 to 3.2, Mr. Nhlanhla Nene states that your evidence which you have adduced before this commission is untrue and has an effect of seriously damaging his reputation. Do you wish to comment before we proceed on other specific paragraphs?
As in my own understanding, everything that I said and presented to this commission is true.
Yes. Now, may I refer you to page 62, with particular reference to paragraph 11. Because of its importance, I'll read it to you for you and allow you to comment thereafter. On paragraph 11, Mr. Nhlanhla Nene says that during October 2015, I had been made aware by Mr. Duduzane Zuma that Mr. Jonas had made allegations to the effect that I was blackmailing him. These allegations seemed incredible and completely at odds with our relationship and true facts. In view of our relationship, I was very perturbed by the allegations and decided to address the issue. I therefore asked Mr. Duduzane Zuma to urgently convene a meeting between the three of us. Now, are you aware of any allegations which you have made to the effect that Mr. Nhlanhla Nene was blackmailing you?
Chair, we dealt with the issue in our affidavit. There are no allegations. They talked about rumors, and there were no rumors that I ever had, and I denied that.
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. I just want to make sure I understood. One, you never said that Mr. Nhlanhla Nene was blackmailing you.
Yes, I didn't.
And two, you said something, and I don't know whether it was that there were no rumors, or I'm not sure. There was something
I
you
never
said.
heard of the rumors.
You have never heard, or you had never heard of any rumors?
Both from Duduzane and from Fana.
Yes. Let me ask this question before Mr. Mokoena proceeds. prior to October 2015, as far as you recall, had you had any discussion with Mr. Duduzane Zuma?
I didn't know Duduzane at all, and
Yes.
the only time I knew about him was in October when Finance Minister indicated to me that he wanted to talk to me, and at that
Yes.
point I requested the cell phone number. We had a
Yes.
couple of telephone calls and text messages right through that period until we ultimately arranged a meeting in
Yes.
Haya. So I didn't know him personally at all.
So certainly prior to October, you had never had any
Never had.
discussions with him. You had never met him
Yeah.
as such. But sometime during October, you did speak to him, following upon what Mr. Hlongwane said to you, and you asked for Mr. Duduzane Zuma's number. Okay, thank you.
Now, having regard to what Mr. Hlongwane has stated in this paragraph, were you at any stage informed about the nature or the extent of these rumors?
No.
Or the content of it?
No.
Yes. And when was the first time you heard about these allegations of rumors of blackmailing?
And I state in my affidavit that when the Gupta brother who entered when we were at Saxon World, the first thing that he talked about was that I hear that Finance Minister is blackmailing you. But he then quickly proceeded. I responded quickly to say, that's nonsense, that's not there, that's not true. And he responded quickly that anyway, that's not the purpose of the meeting. And he proceeded with whatever conversation he wanted.
Just to refresh our memory again, going back to the phone call that you received from Mr. Hlongwane in October, as you have said, can you just tell me the content, remind me of the content of that discussion between the two of you?
The phone call was that the first phone call I remember very well, I was in Luanda. And he called to say Duduzane was looking for me. And it had to do
Yes.
with an event, which was the ANN7 awards. They were
Yes.
happening in a few weeks from then. And the second time it was a physical meeting where I went there with a friend of mine, and I state the name in the affidavit.
Yes.
In the presence of him, he then said, by the way, Duduzane would want to talk to you and want to invite you to this event.
Yes.
as it were.
Yes.
And I said to him, listen, let me take his number so that he contact me directly and we talk
Yes.
directly
Yes,
about
yes,
that. And that's how then
Yes.
the contact happened.
Okay, thank you.
And you have now told the chair that the first time you heard about this blackmailing rumors was on the 23rd of October 2015.
Yes.
Prior to that, Mr. Hlongwane did not even call you or discuss with you about these rumors.
Yes.
No one else have done that.
No one else.
Now, may I refer you to page 63, paragraph 13? And there, Mr. Hlongwane says to the chair that I was subsequently informed by Mr. Duduzane Zuma that he convened a meeting at the Rosebank Hyatt on that day. Prior to my arrival, I decided that because of the private nature of the discussions and possible confrontation, that the Hyatt might not be a suitable venue due to the fact that it was not private. I therefore called Mr. Duduzane Zuma and also spoke to Mr. Jonas. I proposed to them that we move the meeting to a more private venue. Mr. Duduzane Zuma informed me that he has a venue available in the vicinity. I was provided with the address and arranged to meet with them in a couple of minutes. A number of things arises from that paragraph. Mr. Jonas, firstly, would you wish to comment generally on what is being stated there by Mr. Hlongwane?
I cannot comment on the first line because it was not a conversation with me. So I really cannot really say, whether that conversation happened between him and Tutuzani. But certainly, I think, and again, I stated in my affidavit that I phoned Tutuzani and made arrangements to meet at Hyatt because I was in an event close by. So the conversation between Tutuzani and Fana, I cannot comment on that because I was not privy to that. Secondly, that the suggestion to move, I think it arose when Tutuzani raised that there are other people who must join. He never mentioned who they are. He said there are other people who must join and let's move. So I don't actually agree with the explanation of events as stated here.
Now, what you might be able to help us, if you could, if indeed this meeting, the purpose of this meeting was to discuss the rumor about blackmail, do you know why it was supposed to be held in a private location?
I would not know. Definitely no.
And in your statement, you refer to the SMSs and the calls that were made between yourself and Mr. Tutuzani and yourself and Mr. Hlongwane on the day in question. Were you ever told about the purpose of the meeting?
Definitely not. I even spoke to Fana a couple of days before the actual meeting, and there was no mention of a blackmail at all.
Yes. And what also arises in that paragraph, Mr. Hlongwane justifies the moving of the location to a private venue because of a possible confrontation that might ensue. Are you able to assist the chair in understanding?
There was no confrontation at all. There was no possibility of confrontation because there was no tension.
Before the 23rd of October, before the meeting in question, how would you describe your relationship with Mr. Fana Hlongwane?
They were very good. They were very good and cordial.
Now, may I refer you to page 64?
I'm sorry. Your question, Ms. Mkwena, was it before or was it about after the meeting?
No, before the meeting.
Okay.
So meaning that even on the day when you went to meet with Mr. Hlongwane, there's no incident that you can refer to that might result in a confrontation?
No.
May I refer you to page 64? Paragraph 14 and 15, and to save time, I'll simply paraphrase them. In those paragraphs, Mr. Hlongwane says that the people who were present in the meeting, now we are talking about the meeting of the 23rd of October, it was himself, Mr. Hlongwane, Mr. Tutuzani Zuma, and yourself, Mr. Jonas, and no one else. Do you wish to comment?
That's untrue. There was a fourth person, which was the Gupta brother.
He says that if you look at paragraph 16, he says, I mentioned that a member of Gupta family did enter the room briefly at some stage, but immediately left. This was definitely not Mr. A.J. Gupta. I don't know the identity of the person who briefly entered the room. So what we can infer from that paragraph is that there was a Gupta brother, but he simply entered and went out without participating in any discussions.
That's untrue.
Now, on paragraph 17, Mr. Hlongwane denies that there were any offers that were made to you during the meeting in question, and what is your comment?
That's untrue.
So you maintain what you have stated in your testimony before the chair when you testified?
Yes, Chair.
Yes. Now, let's move on to deal with the version of Mr. Tutuzani Zuma.
Before you do that, Mr. Mkwena, Mr. Jonas, you have said what your relationship with Mr. Nhlanhla was before that meeting. How was it after the meeting?
I've never spoken to you. I spoke to you once on the phone, and it stated in my affidavit when I said to him, he must never do that again to anybody.
Yes, yes. And when you say he must not do that again, you were talking about...
I was talking about
the meeting.
The meeting itself.
Yes, and what happened at the meeting on your version. If you say after the meeting, you spoke to him only once, that suggests that whatever friendship or relationship the two of you might have had before ended.
Yes, it did.
Is that correct?
Yes, Chair, it did.
Yes. Okay, all right. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The affidavit of Mr. Zuma, you will locate it on page 171. However, may I refer you to paragraph 4, page 172. Are you there?
Yeah.
In that paragraph, Mr. Zuma states that I depose to this affidavit to give my version of the events, both leading up to and during a meeting that was held between the erstwhile Deputy Minister of Finance, Mr. Mcebisi Jonas, Mr. Fana Hlongwane, and myself on the afternoon of 23rd October 2015. First at the Hyatt Hotel in Rosebank, where I met Mr. Jonas alone, whereafter the meeting was moved to the premises situated at number 5, Saxonwald Drive, Gauteng. Can you see that?
Yes.
Now, when you received a call from Mr. Zuma on the 23rd, did you agree on a specific location where the meeting must take place?
Again, I will just correct. Remember that we have been talking.
Yes.
And the venue, because I said I was in Rosebank, can we make it Hyatt? Because the office where I was going is close to the Hyatt.
So the agreed venue was the Hyatt.
Hyatt.
You were going to meet at the Hyatt.
Yes.
Did Mr. Zuma object to that venue or raise any issues of privacy?
No, it didn't.
Now, when you moved from the Hyatt Hotel to this private place, number 5, Saxonwald Drive, were you informed that the meeting was now going to take place at the Gupta residence?
No.
I'm sorry, Mr. Mkwena. Mr. Jonas, just going back to paragraph 5 of that affidavit, where Mr. Duduzane Zuma says his first interaction with you was to invite you to the South African of the Year Awards, as he had invited various people. Do you recall, are you able to tell when that conversation was, which can be said to have been your first interaction with him, or the day when he invited you to the awards?
It was a call after I came back from Luanda.
And well, I assume you have had a look at your affidavits and statements, and I'm just wondering whether somewhere it is stated around about what date that must have
The dates
been.
are stated in the affidavit.
Oh, can you just tell me if it's possible to, I just want to locate.
If you can go to Exhibit C1, Mr. Jonas.
And then
C1. And then if you can turn to page 2, Mr. Chair. Paragraph 6, I think it might be the one that the Chair is looking for.
Yes.
Mr. Jonas, you can read it for yourself and confirm whether would that be the date that you are looking for.
At approximately 5:30 p.m. on the 17th of October 2015, of arriving in Mozambique, I sent Mr. Zuma a text stating, "Hi, comrades, tried to call you." Approximately 5:36 p.m., I had a short telephone conversation with Duduzane.
In paragraph 7?
Just read it aloud. So it's, yeah.
7 is Mr. Duduzane requested me to attend what I recall to be the South African Year Awards hosted by Africa News Network on Saturday the 17th in Johannesburg. I ultimately indicated that I would not be able to attend, telling him that my schedule would not permit it.
So is the position that the first interaction that you had with Mr. Duduzane Zuma was on or about the 17th of October 2015? That's the date given in paragraph 6, but it says approximately 5:30 on 17 October.
Yes.
So that would be the first interaction you ever had directly with him.
Yes, Chair.
Yes. And it was on that occasion that he invited you to the South African of the Year Awards, which was to be held. Or was it going to be held on the same day?
There must be a problem with dates here, Chair.
There might be a problem with the date.
Yeah, I must check that. Yeah.
But was it going to, as far as you recall?
It was a couple of days.
It was a couple of days, within a week or so?
Less than a week, I think.
Or less than a week, okay. But the date of the 17th October, do you feel confident that it must be correct as the date when?
I think that was the
because
date.
that would be from your SMSs. You first sent him an SMS, I think you said.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay, so that would, it looks like, at least in that regard, well, Mr. Duduzane Zuma doesn't say what day it was that the two of you had that interaction. At least he doesn't say so in paragraph 5, what the date was, but it seems that both of you agreed that you first spoke to each other on the day you spoke about, he invited you to the awards, South African of the Year Awards.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and on your version, that conversation was on the 17th of October 2015. Okay, thank you. You may proceed, Mr.
Yes.
Gwen.
If you may turn to page 173, Mr. Jonas.
Yeah.
Page 173, paragraph 8. In that paragraph, Mr. Zuma stated that you met with him as agreed at the Hyatt Hotel and then moved to the Gupta residence, number 5, Section Weld. Now, what I want to know, if you were told, Mr. Jonas, that you were going to meet at the Gupta residence, how were you going to react to that request?
I definitely would have avoided to go.
Why?
Look, I mean, they were already in the media about their activities, and certainly I would not have been loved to be associated with them.
Yes. Now, if you look on the second portion of paragraph 8, Mr. Zuma says that we accordingly agreed to move to number 5, Section Weld, and in brackets it says Gupta residence. What is your reaction to that statement?
That's untrue. That's untrue.
Now, he also states that you traveled with him in his vehicle. Can you see that?
That's correct. Yeah.
Are you able to explain to the chair why did you travel with him in his vehicle?
Look, I mean, his vehicle was the closest. It was just down the parking area at Hyatt. Secondly, I didn't see any difficulty. I didn't have any reason not to trust him, quite frankly.
And then what about the bodyguards? I mean, I take it that at the time you were with your bodyguards. Why did you leave your bodyguards behind?
I leave them all the time. All the time.
May I refer you to the very same page, if you go down to paragraph 9. Mr. Zuma says that I point out at no stage, since the suggestion was made that the meeting be moved to the Gupta residence, did Mr. Jonas either object thereto and or express any reservation and or display any discomfort of having the meeting there. That's what Mr. Zuma says.
That's untrue, I mean, because there was no knowledge that the meeting is going to the Gupta residence.
Now, may I refer to page 174? Paragraph 11 and 12, I'll simply paraphrase them to save time. There, Mr. Zuma states that there were only 3 people present at the meeting, and he stated that no one else was there. Mr. Rajesh Gupta simply came in for a few seconds and thereafter exited the room. What is your comment on that?
That's untrue. There was a Gupta present right through the discussion.
Right through the discussion. Now, if you go to paragraph 13, Mr. Zuma says that after the meeting, I was required to stay behind to attend further meetings, and a driver took Mr. Jonas to where he wanted to be. Mr. Hlongwane also remained behind with me. Would this be consistent with what you have told the chair, that after the meeting, Mr. Hlongwane and Mr. Duduzane remained?
Yes, they remained.
Now, if you can turn the page over to page 175. And paragraph 16, because of its importance, I'll read it to you and to allow you to comment. In that paragraph, Mr. Duduzane Zuma says, I further confirm that on this specific day in question, being 23rd October 2015, Mr. Atul Gupta was not present, as he was, as far as I can recall, overseas. I also confirm that Mr. A.J. Gupta was not at the Gupta residence at the time. To the best of my recollection, he was somewhere else or at his office in Sandton. He therefore had no interaction at all with Mr. Jonas. Are you able to comment?
I'm unable to comment on that, except to say that I'm confident that there was a Gupta brother in the room.
And in paragraph 17, Mr. Jonas, Mr. Zuma denies that there were ever discussions which took place about the removal of the Minister of Finance. He further denies that there were any monetary offers which were made to you. He further denies that there were any threats that were advanced towards you. What is your comment?
I don't agree. It's untrue.
It's untrue. Now, on paragraph 18, Mr. Zuma says that I did not take Mr. Jonas to the airport after the meeting, nor did I receive a call from Mr. Jonas. I wish to point out that subsequent to the meeting of 23rd October 2015, I informally bumped into Mr. Jonas on 2 occasions, once at the Hyatt Hotel again, and once at the parliamentary event. I can state that on both these occasions, we had friendly interactions with each other, and there was no indication whatsoever of animosity. Now he's telling the chair about your relationship with him subsequent to the event of the 23rd, and he specifies the occasions that he met with you and that there was no animosity and you were friendly with one another.
The first part of the, I did not take Mr. Jonas to the airport is correct. And I also wish to point out subsequent to the meeting.
Just raise your voice a little bit, Mr.
I'm saying the part
Jonas.
that talks about taking me to the airport is correct. It didn't take me to the airport. The part about receiving calls, I recall very strictly that we did text each other, and I have those in the
previous statement.
In the statement, when subsequent to the meeting, when he was requesting to meet after that. So there was some interaction after that. The two occasions are correct, but I don't think we even came into contact. So I don't know how there would have animosity arising or friendliness, because we were very far apart. It was as if we were like meeting. He was walking past and I was walking in the other direction.
Now, let me provide you with an opportunity to react to the versions of the Gupta brothers, starting first with AJ Kumar Gupta, and we'll then deal with the one of Rajesh Gupta. The one of AJ Kumar Gupta, you'll find it on page 165. If you can turn to page 165, Mr. Jonas. That's where it begins, but I wish to refer you to paragraph 5, which you will find on page 166.
Got it.
And in that paragraph, you'll see that from paragraph 5 to 5.3, Mr. Gupta paraphrases your statement, but what I wish that you may provide a comment on is the contents of paragraph 5.3, where he says, a belated allegation in his latest signed statement, dated 8 August 2018, to the Commission of the Inquiry, wherein for the first time claims that I also threatened to kill him should he not cooperate with me or the Gupta family. Now, before you react to that statement, let me tie that statement with a similar allegation that is made by Mr. Gupta. You'll find it on page 168, paragraph 10. So as you may be able to comment at once. At paragraph 10, Mr. Gupta says that Mr. Jonas also for the first time ever incorporated in his most recent statement dated 8 August 2018 and claimed that I threatened to kill him should he not give his cooperation to me. In his version to the public protector, he never had such claims, even when he was specifically questioned about any threats he may have received. If you may comment on those two paragraphs.
Firstly, I think the first formal statement we made was with an extensive statement we made was with the Commission.
Yes.
There was in the conversation and questioning with the public protector happened in a different environment, and I stated already that it was conversational and responded to many of the questions that she raised, and it was a different context because the context was very hostile at the time. I was still Minister of Finance and I wouldn't want to do that. The second statement, the other statement we made was with the Hawks, and we had already given the Hawks a statement to say we would not give you a statement because they had already indicated that their intention was to destroy the case. And based on that, we sent them a statement. And later on, I think my lawyer insisted, drafted a statement, responding to questions that they gave, which I signed. Again, I'm saying, in all those, this is the statement to the Commission was the first formal, extensive statement I made in a context where I was confident that there will be no reprisals.
Yes. What Mr. Gupta takes issue with is that when you had all these opportunities, even before the public protector, you did not mention any threats that you were to be killed if you're not going to cooperate with the Guptas. And why does it appear only for the first time in this commission?
Again, I'm saying you must understand the context. I mean, at the time, that was probably the most difficult period for us. Even the conversation with the public protector, Chair, we walked into the conversation, she asked us questions. I was very uncertain, even about talking to her. I didn't trust anybody. I didn't trust the police, quite frankly. And I mean, when I went to the commission, I knew that it's a public thing. I have my confidence back. I can say what I want to say. Probably, if reprisals come, they will come through illegal mechanisms. I outlined earlier on how the Hawks treated us.
Yes. Now, may I refer to page 167? With particular reference to paragraph 6 and 7. I won't read them, I'll simply paraphrase them to save time. Mr. I.J. Gupta, in those paragraphs, denies ever meeting with you on the 23rd of October 2015, and he states that he was at his office at Oak Bay in Catherine. Do you wish to comment?
I maintain my position that and based on the information I had at the time, I thought, I said it was Mr. Ajay Gupta was there. But I'm certain now, that there was a Gupta brother, and as I've always said, and right through, I had always had the disclaimers on the matter.
Yes. And let's deal with page 168, what to state on paragraph 9. In fact, Mr. Jonas, in order for that paragraph to make sense, let's begin on paragraph 8 on page 167. I'll read them quickly. There, Mr. Gupta says that it is also plain and indisputable that my identity was introduced to Mr. Jonas by way of a leading question suggested to him and of photos of me being shown to him to enable him to conclude that he in fact met with me specifically and not with anybody else, whereafter he accepted and claimed that whereafter he accepted and claimed that he in fact did have a meeting with me. And paragraph 9, he later, in an application in High Court Pretoria, which was dismissed with cost by the then Minister of Finance, Minister Gordon, against Oak Bay Group of companies without any qualification and or hesitation, in fact confirmed under oath that he met with me and nobody else. However, in his latest statement dated 8 August 2018, to the investigators of the Commission of the Inquiry on State Capture, Mr. Jonas claims that he is still unsure with whom he has met on that specific day, as he did not know the Gupta brothers and had never been introduced to the Gupta brothers before, and it may have been my brother Rajesh Gupta with whom he met on that specific day. Now he's pointing out to what he terms the uncertainties, and at some stage you having said it was him, and now at the commission it appears that you are unsure about who exactly was present. What is your comment?
Again, probably, if you go back to the Oak Bay affidavit, there was already a disclaimer there. If you read the full affidavit, you will see that there was a disclaimer that says that it could be any other Gupta brother, but definitely there was a Gupta brother. That's what we were trying to convey. Of course, we were saying Ajay because based on the information I had at the time and the assumption, and that's again looking at the pictures. This was 4 years ago, by the way, and I have met the guys for the first time, and I've never met them after that, and that's the reality.
So on the 23rd of October, it was the first time that
was
you
the
met
first meeting I had with him, that brief encounter, and I've never seen him again. And it was just looking at pictures, and I concluded that it could be Ajay. So to the best of my knowledge at the time, I assumed that it was him. But when I was preparing the statements for the commission, it was the first time that a couple more pictures I looked at, and I realized that I can't tell the difference between the two. But anyway, I think I think at the moment it's common cause that there was a Gupta brother.
Yes. On.
Well, certainly on your version there was a Gupta brother, and I think on Mr. Tutuzane Zuma's and Mr. Hlongane's version, on your version there was a Gupta brother throughout the meeting or the discussion. On their version, a Gupta brother, I think, came in for a short time and went out. Is that your understanding of the difference between
Chair,
the two
I think
versions?
the central point is that
Yes.
there was a Gupta brother in the room.
Yes.
And all of us agree
Yes.
on that. I mean, I can go back and look at the statements.
Okay, all right.
Yes.
Mr. Mkwena.
Can you now turn to page 169, paragraph 12? Mr. Gupta says that I also gave evidence under oath to the public protector denying the allegations and the version claimed by Mr. Jonas, and I also deposed to an affidavit in the Minister of Finance application in the High Court Pretoria, which is self-explanatory. I point out that it is highly unlikely that the meeting took place, because if it did in the manner alleged by Mr. Jonas, he would immediately have reported it to the nearest police station as any other ordinary citizen was legally obliged and duty bound under the law to do so. Any comment?
I don't agree with the statement at all.
Yes. Do you have anything to say about it or anything to add?
Look, I mean, on the reporting part, which probably was what I covered it quite extensively in the affidavit, and the position articulated in my affidavit, I still think it's valid.
Yes, and lastly
And basically that was that you didn't have much confidence in the law enforcement agencies, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
okay.
And lastly, on the version of Mr. Gupta, on paragraph 15 on page 170, he concludes by saying that there were no offers made at all to you, be it monetary or ministerial position.
I don't agree.
Well, I don't think you represented what Mr. Gupta says there accurately, Mr. Mkwena. He says he did not make any offer.
Yes, he.
Not that no offers were made.
That he, Mr. Gupta, did not make those offers. Mr. Jonas, the answer remains the same.
Same.
Yes. Now,
the answer can't be the same if you are not sure whether he was at the meeting, because you don't know which of the brothers. You just know there was a Gupta brother, isn't it?
Yes.
So you can't say it was him who made the offer. All you can say is
The offer was made.
an offer was made by a Gupta brother.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
now let's deal with the version of Mr. Rajesh Gupta. You'll find it on page 178.
Well, Mr. Mkwena, just bear in mind that if they say the same thing and he has
Yes.
already responded, there is no need
To repeat them.
to
yes.
repeat, yeah.
Did you have an occasion to read the affidavit of Mr. Gupta?
Yes, I did.
You did. And I take it that to the extent that they deny that anyone made an offer to you on the day in question, your answers will be as reflected in your statement. And to the extent that there was no Gupta brother that was present throughout the conversation, you will remain, you persist with what you have said in your statement before the chair.
Yes.
Now, may I refer to Exhibit C1. If you look at the spine, Mr. Jonas, they are marked. Page, it is the transcript of the public protector containing your interview with the public protector. It starts from page 21. It runs up until page 89. However, I wish to refer you to page 50. Page 50, Mr. Chair.
50.
50. Now, on page 50, against the line 14, that's where you begin to respond to a question posed to you by the public protector.
Where it is possible to just paraphrase the point
Yes.
that was being made, please do so without reading, unless there is something significant about the wording.
Definitely, Mr. Chair. In this one, Mr. Jonas, I would read it, from paragraph 14 to line 2 on the next page, because there are a number of issues that are quite unclear, which you told the public protector. You state that it is not as if it did not cross my mind. Because it did cross my mind that I should. I, in fact, was thinking seriously about doing it, and I just thought about it seriously. And I ended up saying, no, maybe there's no need. Now pay attention to what I'm going to read now, Mr. Jonas. We say 2 reasons. One was that I did not trust that he would do anything about it. I mean government, by the way, and in political circles. I hear people saying they have been approached by these guys. That's the first thing. Secondly, you say, I know that, there are many people who say that, I cannot mention their names here, but I know they always say, it is a common thing in the system that happens in the first instance. That's what you told the public protector. You proceed by saying, but the second problem I had is that what guidance was I going to take from him on a matter like that, because it is his son, and I thought I cannot take guidance from him when I think he is conflicted on the matter. Now, the first clarity which I'm seeking from you, can you elaborate to us on what you state that in government and in political circles, you had people saying that they were approached by these guys? Who are these people that you're talking about? And who are the guys who approached them?
It has been a known fact at the time that a lot of people, in the circles, people will say, Mbalula, for instance, stood up and say in an NEC meeting formally that he received the news from the Guptas. You also have a couple of other people, Temba Maseko, for instance, had a story already at the time. And there are many more stories of people who, and many of them have said where I'm sitting now. Wako, for instance,
Well,
and
I'm not sure you are right to say many of them have sat there. Some have, but
some have.
I would like many to sit there.
Some have, I mean, have sat here and before.
Are
And I
there-
mean, there's
Basically,
also,
you're talking about ministers, deputy ministers, maybe some DGs, and other officials
CEOs and of companies,
Of
state-owned
parastatals.
parastatals, yeah.
Yes. And secondly, what appears to be unclear, you say that what guidance was I going to take from him? Who are you referring to?
The question was relating to why didn't I not tell the president?
Yes.
And my attitude was, it's like my son does something and you come to me and tell me. I thought it was like wasteful, it was wasting energy. I didn't have confidence that he would have done anything about it.
Yes. And last,
Well, I'm not sure about that example, Mr. Jonas.
That's a bad example.
Where I grew up, any adult person who finds you as a child or boy doing something wrong anywhere could discipline you, and you would not even tell your parents because they could give you a hiding and say, an adult person wasn't going to discipline you for nothing. You must have done something wrong. So some parents would really inquire into what did you do and so on.
But I mean, the scale of what we're talking about, Chair, is such that, and the news, I mean, they've been running about some of the events and things that were happening. So certainly you should have known about some of these things.
Yeah, well, I was talking more about you and your son.
Oh, my son. If the scale of what he does is this, I'll probably decide to do something else.
Okay, Mr. Mkwena.
finally, Mr. Jonas, in order to short-circuit your evidence, you are aware that Mr. Koran, Minister Koran, Minister Nene, and Mr. Fuzile, including Mr. Mohojani, did testify before this commission.
I am aware.
And did you have an opportunity to consider their evidence in as far as it related to you?
Yes, I did.
And do you confirm that evidence to the extent that they referred to yourself?
Broadly, I do.
Yes, Mr. Chair, that concludes my questions for Mr. Jonas.
Okay, that's just at the right time for the tea break. I think we'll take the short break, and when we come back, which will be 11:30, then counsel for Mr. Tutuzane Zuma can commence with cross-examination. We adjourn, we'll resume at 12:30. We adjourn.
take all the space that you need.
Perfect.
Mr. Law, I now give you the opportunity to cross-examine Mr. Jonas. I did indicate that although I thought 30 minutes might be fine, I won't be rigid. I will see how things go, and I rely on your cooperation and your bona fide attempt also to try and make sure that we deal with really important issues.
Mr. Chair, of course, could I, before I commence...
And I do know that you would like more.
Oh, certainly. But could I say this?
Yes.
Just to preface, perhaps, the cross-examination.
Yes.
The aspects on which I'm going to cross-examine, Mr. Chair, are front and center in your inquiry. If one recalls that item 1.1 of your terms of reference makes specific reference to the incident on which I'm going to cross-examine.
Yes.
You will recall that what it says is the Commission must investigate, and here comes the important part, the veracity of allegations that former Deputy Minister of Finance, Mr. Jonas, and Ms. Mentor were offered cabinet positions by the Gupta family. It is thus not a matter where we can perhaps deal with on a very elevated scale like we did this morning with the with respect to the grand theories of political issues, grand political theory perhaps, we have to drill down to some facts. Now, as you have pointed out, Mr. Chair, there are two completely conflicting versions, only about a small part of the whole incident. You have summarized where the differences of opinion lie, and unfortunately, when one then has to test the veracity of a witness, you have no choice but to deal with the rather difficult issues of contradictions and probabilities and credibility. So half an hour is going to be exceptionally difficult to fit in a lot of this work. There's also an issue of these proceedings and what they are about. Mr. Chair, you are enjoined to determine the veracity. You use, of course, your legal or the legal team to do the footwork, but at the end of the day, you must make all inquiries that are necessary, even if that means that from this cross-examination, further inquiries have to be done in order to determine whether there is objective evidence one way or the other, and that should be done. So these are not adversarial proceedings. And I'm not here simply to meet a case and so forth, because Mr. Zuma will testify, and he will testify completely differently to what Mr. Jonas has testified. As a matter of fairness, perhaps, the cross-examination should deal with some of what we see to be glaring inconsistencies and contradictions and issues of credibility. And to fit all of that into a half an hour package will be difficult, which means that if at the end of all of this we do not succeed in, for purposes of fairness, showing Mr. Jonas what all the issues are that we believe count against his version, then perhaps another plan should be made, and perhaps we should be allowed to present you with a list, perhaps, of contradictions and so forth, to be looked at in your own good time.
I think all of that, all of what you have just said, Mr. Lowe, is fair enough and quite legitimate, and I'm in agreement with what you have said. So I don't see any problem.
So the only point I'm trying to make
I just hope that our agreement will endure to cover
certainly,
the time as well.
The only point that I actually wish to make is, if I do not put certain points to Mr. Jonas in these proceedings, it must not be held against Mr. Zuma when he testifies.
No, that's fine.
Thank you.
Maybe I should just say this, that the idea, or part of the idea behind, I think it's Rule 3.4, which says that an implicated person who applies for leave to cross-examine must, the application must be accompanied by a statement which deals with the areas where he or she is implicated, and the idea is that that statement will give his version, and I think everybody has understood it that way, because that's also helpful when I have to determine how much time I should allow for cross-examination. But I have no problem whatsoever with a situation where an opportunity may be given for you to submit certain other, let's say, inconsistencies, as you may see it, by way of something in writing. That's not a problem.
Once again, these aren't adversarial proceedings. I'm not here to meet a case. I'm simply here to assist the Commission, and there are two people, and there's front and center of this case who have conflicting versions about something that you have, Mr. Chair, in your wisdom, and it's going to be a difficult task to determine the veracity of. Thank you.
No, thank
if
you.
I then, against that background,
thank you.
May the clock tick.
That's right.
Mr. Jonas, I don't have a lot of time, so you must please bear with me. I'm going to touch on a few topics As you've just heard from the exchange, there are a few more that I perhaps would have wanted to deal with if I had unlimited time, but, well, that's how things are. The first point that I would want to ask you about is the public protector, the proceedings at the public protector. Can you recall whether you were represented by attorneys or advocates?
I was with my attorney.
With your attorney? And he is, or was?
Max Pakwana.
Do you have a copy of, well, you would, because then a colleague asked you about that, the transcript of the public protector in the bundle C1, as he has pointed out previously. Just look at the spine and you should see it. You have it. What we find is, pardon? If I can just ask you quickly to help me, the proceedings at the public prosecutor commence at page 21. Yeah, you've got it. The person referred there to as Advocate Bukwana should be Attorney Bukwana. Is that correct? Yeah. But we see consistently that the person is referred to as Advocate and addressed as that as well. Can I then ask you, at the end of that meeting, can you recall that your attorney undertook to provide a statement to the public protector called a timeline that would deal with various points that were raised during the conversation with the public protector, that you were not too clear about dates and so forth?
He did promise to do that.
And was it done?
Yes, it was done, but I must also say that when it was effectively done, that there were lots of, I think, contradictions in the dates, because we have not had the chance of looking at phones and other things like that.
I
So
did not
broadly-
hear the last part of
I'm sorry,
your
Mr. Lowe.
answer.
I'm sorry. I must just check. Is Mr. Jonas sufficiently audible at the back? Yeah, some can't hear him well. So one, you might wish to just raise your voice a little more, but it might be the equipment, so they will look at it as well.
Thank you,
Okay,
Chair.
thank you.
I'm saying he did put together the document.
Yes. You say there are some difficulties with dates in the document.
At the time, because it was a rushed process at the time.
But the contents of it, the narrative contained in it, never mind the dates, that would be correct.
They are even in the narrative. I don't have it in front of me.
Turn to page 90.
90.
Is that the statement?
Yeah, it is.
All right, let's
There
go.
was even in content, there were a couple of confusions in the way he articulated it.
It's very curious because it was sent to the public protector, and we find aspects of this document to be reflected in the public protector's report. That is the genesis of this very commission. I just put that here as a statement. The question is, did you look at the statement before it went out?
I did look at it broadly, and
You did look at it?
Yeah.
Yes? Go on, please. Sorry, I interrupted you.
I'm saying I did look at it, and I pointed some of the things that were lumped together and things that could have articulated differently based on my own recollection of facts. But
And was it corrected or not?
they were never corrected.
So your attorney, Mr. Bukwana, sent out knowingly a wrong statement to the public protector.
It was not wrong. The content, broadly speaking, is correct.
But are there points now that you look back at it that are incorrect?
Yeah, there are points that we could say were incorrect.
In what sense were they incorrect? A misunderstanding perhaps, or what?
In a case where ideas are lumped together and where points that are separated could have been separated, could be separated.
All right. Let us look at a few of those points that were, according to you, lumped together and gave a wrong impression. let us commence with, on page 90, I think I'm not going, because of the limit of time, I'm not going to deal with all of it, but could I ask you the second bullet point you have there, meeting with Advocate Fana Shlongwane and Mr. Bongani More and Mr. Jonas, yourself. And then the narrative below that, I've got to just quickly place that on record. I decided to meet with Advocate Shlongwane to hear him out on the issue of meeting Mr. Duduzane Zuma and the Gupta family. Is that correct?
That's not correct.
So this is an incorrect statement that your attorney sent to the public protector.
There are two. If you look at my own statement, I corrected it in my statement because essentially there were two discussions in this meeting, and I make that very clear in my statement. The one discussion was the invitation by Duduzane Zuma to go to the awards. The second part of the discussion that arose, and I state that in my statement, was a discussion about, a general discussion where Fana started talking to us about how important the Guptas are. And there was a third person in the meeting, so you could verify that. These are separate issues.
So, sorry, I'm not quite with you. If I look at this, this is before. What you are dealing with here in this paragraph happened prior to the introduction to Mr. Zuma.
I still maintain there were two separate issues.
Yes, but
one is the issue about meeting Duduzane. The second is an issue about Fana telling us how important the Guptas were.
Yes, they're two separate issues. I do not dispute that, but you find them here. Let us go on. And I went to see him with another friend, that is now Mr. Shlongwane, Mr. Bongani More. The discussion ensued, I suppose, briefly, with reasons why it is important to meet with Mr. Zuma and the Gupta family.
No, that's incorrect. Again, the discussion we had, and I stated quite categorically, the discussion we had was a discussion about the meeting with Duduzane, which turned out to be a meeting about arranging an invitation to go to the awards. The second discussion that happened was a general discussion where Fana was talking about general politics and the importance of the Guptas generally.
Yes, I do not dispute that one reads that there were two separate discussions, but what we don't find in any of your other statements are sentences like meeting the Gupta family, why it is important to meet the Gupta family. It's only in this statement.
There was no discussion on the importance of meeting the Gupta family.
The
discussion was about the importance of the Gupta family. And that I capture in a statement that I signed.
So this is just patently wrong.
I say so. The compilation was wrong.
All right, let's go on. Then you go on in that same paragraph, we agreed to revisit this issue as I was not really convinced I needed to meet them. Not really convinced that I needed to meet them. Is this also wrong?
That's wrong. I mean, the discussion was
Once again, is it a fiction from the attorney and not yourself?
I still think that it was a confusion about the discussion at the time. And this was actually very kind of done in a rush. And that's precisely why I could not even sign it.
Mr. Jonas, you were a deputy minister. This was a serious affair. It was investigated at the highest level. Are you seriously telling this commission that you were happy to let a statement containing errors, patent errors, go out in your name?
If I had to sign the statement, I would have gone to it with a fine comb and actually found out all the contradictions in the statement.
So if it goes out under your name but you don't sign, it doesn't matter?
No, I'm not saying that.
All right.
I'm saying if I had an opportunity to sign it and peruse it, I would have come to a different conclusion. But on those points, it was lumping together issues that could have been separated.
We'll see how much it was lumped together. Let's go on with this passage. I further expressed my view that I would never want to be associated with the Gupta family. Did you express that view?
I have expressed it quite a time ago.
In that meeting with Mr. Shlongwane?
I did.
Who is Mr. More?
He's a friend of mine.
Where is he? Who is he?
He's a friend of mine. He was part of that conversation. In fact, he wrote a statement about the same meeting.
Is it? And that was provided to the...
Not yet.
Not yet? So is it a private statement?
No. It will be providing a statement to the Commission.
When?
I don't know.
I suppose when the Commission decides to investigate this matter further and ask him questions.
Yes.
Of course. And then you go on to say, my impression was that he, that is Mr. Finance Nhlangla, was working with them, of course now being the Guptas, for financial gain. Is that correct?
I'm saying, again, this paragraph, I would have, if I had writing it, I would have written it differently. Because in essence, the discussion was about, firstly, are you going to be able to talk to Duduzane because he wants to talk to you in relation to the ANN7? The second one, as we were talking about the politics in the country, he then raised the issue about the importance of the Guptas, etc. And in that context, I specifically said I would not have anything to do with the Guptas, but also proceeded to say that, and this point about my impression, again, I thought, there was nothing else that could combine Fana with the Guptas except money anyway. But that's what was in the statement.
When the public protector had her interview with yourself, she asked you certain questions about motives, possible motives for this topic of blackmail that you explained this morning to the Commissioner was an issue that was raised at the Saxon World meeting on the 25th of October 2015. 23rd of October 2015. Is that correct?
Yes, she did.
And she asked you about your motives, whether you had any issue with Mr. Nhlangla, historical issue.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Did you not have any issue with him?
I don't have any historical issue.
But you were you old friends? Let me ask you.
We were friends.
Old friends?
I would say old. I don't know what old. Is it 2 years, 5 years?
No. From the Eastern Cape days.
Well, we knew each other from the struggle, but I think as in the transition, we got more, interacted more.
Of course. Did you have, there was an issue that arose in the Eastern Cape to which the public protector refers. And I don't want to take you there because it's going to waste time. Do you recall that she mentioned an issue that she, from her office, investigated at the time, the public protector investigated concerning the Eastern Cape, where you were personally involved in as well?
Well, the issue that the Tuli at the time was investigated was the Mandela funeral. And I did give evidence to her on that issue. And it was probably irrelevant to the discussion.
What was your position at that point in the Eastern Cape?
I was MEC for Economic Development.
And then what happened to you after that?
I moved to National.
Was there a period in between?
It was almost that period of transition where you didn't know. In fact, I was moving out of government at the time.
You were moving out of government?
Yeah, that was my intention at the time.
And how long were you out of government? Or did you not, were you not an MEC or a deputy minister?
I was called back in probably a month or two.
But those dates can be checked in any event.
Yeah, okay.
Objectively, yes. All right, thank you. So if we then can move on, then in that same document, let's just quickly deal with the document, not page too much. I'm almost halfway through my cross-examination. If you look at page 90, just a little bit from the bottom, you see the date October 23, 2015.
Where are you now?
Page 90 still.
90. Yeah.
Right. There's a sentence there. Later on, I agreed to meet with Mr. Duduzane Zuma and Advocate Finance Nhlangla. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So you met the agreement. Can I just get this very clear?
Can I correct that again? I agreed to Fana that I will meet Duduzane.
But it stated
and
completely...
following that, I took the number for Duduzane.
Yes.
From that point on, the conversation was between myself and Duduzane.
Yes. The point simply is this, that the meeting at the Hyatt, that commenced at the Hyatt on the 23rd of October, you knew you were going to meet both Mr. Shlongwane and Mr. Zuma. Is that correct?
No,
You did not.
no. The meeting at Hyatt was arranged between myself and Duduzane.
Did you
it
not?
It was only when I was sitting at Hyatt that Fana called. And in this call, he said, I understand that you're meeting with Duduzane. And I said, yes, we are here. He's here already anyway.
All right. Look, at least from that point onwards, the call that was made by Mr. Shlongwane was you and Mr. Zuma were together in the Hyatt already at about 1 o'clock. Is that correct?
Yeah.
On the 23rd?
Yeah.
It's about 1 o'clock. Right, so you get a phone call from Mr. Shlongwane, and from that moment onwards, you know that he is going to meet with you.
No, I didn't.
You did not?
I didn't. By the time we drove from there, I didn't even know what was his conversation with Duduzane. The conversation with me, I can verify. He said, I understand that you found each other. I said, yes. And then he spoke to Duduzane later. He called Duduzane later or before that, I don't know. But when we left, I was unaware that Fana was part of the meeting.
You see, it's at that point where the versions differ and commence to differ. What happened before, the phone calls, the texts, and afterwards, no dispute that there was communication. But it's at this point where the evidence before the Commission will in due course be that you knew precisely that you were going to meet Mr. Shlongwane. And
No.
that was what the purpose of the whole meeting was.
No, Mr. Shlongwane was not part of the meeting, in my understanding. He had arranged a meeting for Duduzane and myself to meet.
And that is precisely in line with what you yourself say in your timeline that was drafted by your attorney and sent to the public protector. Later on, I agreed to meet with Mr. Duduzane Zuma and Mr. Fana Shlongwane. Your own statement, but you say that's wrong.
I said that's wrong. I mean,
And you didn't check.
this-
You didn't check the statement.
I didn't check the
You
statement.
didn't check the statement at all.
I did look at the statement, and I looked at it broadly because I was not meant to sign the statement. In any case,
Whose statement was it?
the statement I made was with Thuli, and it's in the public protector interaction.
Yes, of course. We have that record. But this document that was prepared in your name, that you saw, and you must have seen that there are these glaring errors.
But I still maintain it is incorrect that and that I maintain, by the way, that it is incorrect that I went there knowing that Fana was there. Actually,
Yes.
I was pretty much surprised when I walked into the gate. Fana, I think we coincided in our
Yes.
arrival.
Right, let us just look then at, on your version. You see, there are now two versions, and it's very complicated because there is no dispute that you went with Mr. Zuma in his vehicle to the Saxonwold premises of the Gupta family, and that there was a discussion. There's no dispute about it. It's only the contents of the discussion and your motives, because what this commission must investigate is the veracity of your version insofar as how it got that you came to that residence in the first place. Now, let me ask you this, and I'm not asking you apropos of any document, but we can have a look at the statements, but it will take time. Let me ask you this. You sat there at the Hyatt after having left a NEDLAC meeting in Rosebank, is that correct?
Yes.
Was the minister at that NEDLAC meeting as well? That was Minister Nene at that time. Yes?
Yes.
Did he stay on after you had left?
No, we almost, I could not, I don't have any recollection, but my suspicion that we left almost the same time, because later when I called him, he was on his way to the airport.
But that was much later in the afternoon.
No, that was not too much later.
Not too much later. How long was this meeting with, at the Gupta residence, according to your memory?
It was between 20 and 30 minutes.
How many?
You mean which meeting?
The meeting at the Gupta
It was
residence.
between 20 and 30 minutes.
20 and 30 minutes. All right. Accept that for the moment. You met at 1 o'clock, roughly 1 o'clock. I know that we are talking about approximations.
I'm also approximating, by the way.
Yes, of course. No. We are not going to make any argument based on the exact times, Mr. Jonas. But you sit at the Hyatt, having left the NEDLAC meeting, and you meet Mr. Zuma there. You then have, and I will take you to it, let me not say that there are discrepancies, but you explain the circumstances differently in different words in the various statements that you've made. Leave that aside. For the moment, what I'm interested in to ask you is, whilst you sit there, you get the call from Mr. Jonas, not Mr. Jonas, I apologize, Mr. Shlongwane, and then something happens, and this meeting moves to other premises. That's what I want to ask you about. All right, now, just on that point, did you ask Mr. Zuma, what is the meeting about?
We started a conversation. Well, I didn't, by the way. I didn't.
You did not?
I didn't.
Why not?
Look, I mean, I knew he was going to explain to me what the meeting was about. So I just waited for him to articulate what the meeting was about. And by the way, at the time, I didn't have any mistrust about what his intentions were.
No. We will get to trust, mistrust, and motives in a moment or two. Just stop there. You are a deputy minister, and you have public, personal protectors with you, bodyguards. Is that correct?
Yes.
How many?
2.
You have an official vehicle. Is that correct?
Yes.
Where was that vehicle parked?
It was parked upstairs outside.
Upstairs?
Outside, they hired.
Just outside. If you wanted to leave, they would bring the vehicle for you to the front door. Absolutely. Otherwise, you would be a target if you had to walk up and down streets, not so. That's the purpose of having personal protectors. Is that right?
I assume yes.
You then decide, Mr. Jonas, to leave with Mr. Zuma to a place you did not know for a purpose you did not know. Is that correct?
Yes, I did.
And you left your protectors behind.
Yeah, I did.
And your vehicle.
I did. Again, I mean, when he said to me, when we had a preliminary discussion, and in that conversation it was about his father and what his father thinks about me, and I outlined that. And after that discussion, he then says, listen, we can't meet here, and we have to meet elsewhere. In any case, I would want other people to join us. I said, of course, let's do that.
Thank you.
I asked him how far, because I'm rushing to the airport, that was the time. And he said, no, it's not far, it's just around the corner. I said, okay.
So did you ask who are the other people we're going to meet?
I didn't ask. I mean, I really didn't have any reason to assume that there was something funny or bad that was about to happen.
But Mr. Zuma's name and the Gupta's name had been linked. If we look at this statement and all the other statements, it's always the two of them together when Mr. Shlongwane talks to you about these matters.
I can put it differently. The president's son says he wants to talk to me. I will go and listen to him. Whether I would do what he says I must do, it's another story. I will go and listen to him. I will not even interrogate him about what the meeting is about.
Mr. Jonas, you're a deputy minister. You leave your protectors behind, your vehicle behind. You get into a car with a man you had just met a few minutes ago to go to a meeting where you don't know where the location is, to talk about things you have no idea what it's going to be, and to meet unknown people. Is that your evidence?
That's what I'm saying. I do travel alone most of the time, by the way.
Yes. Right.
And I did.
Good.
I'm sorry. Did you finish answering that question? Okay, all right.
All right. We then know that there was the meeting that was held, and I want to march on very quickly to one or two other points that occurred afterwards, just to get some clarification. At the foot of page 91 of that bundle, if you look at the very last paragraph there, that's now after you explain all of these various things that were said during the disputed conversation. As you know, it's disputed. The last line there is, if I may just pick up the sentence after the word "and," I asked both Duduzane and Fana to take me to the airport as I was running late. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And then on the way to the airport, I asked both Duduzane and Fana what was the purpose of the meeting.
No, that's incorrect interpretation again.
interpretation. That's a statement of fact.
And I'm saying that it's written badly again, because I asked, as I was leaving the Gupta house, I asked them to take me to the airport, and they said, there is a vehicle that's taking me to the airport. And as on my way to the airport, I made a couple of calls, to people. And one of them, I think, was to Fana. And when I landed in PE, again, I made a call to Fana.
I'm not asking about those calls. That's not what the question is about. It's about this patently wrong statement, because once again, it is interesting. Mr. Zuma agrees that you were taken by one of the Gupta vehicles to the airport.
I also said so in my statement.
Now, of course you did, but here it's different. And the question is, why is it different here?
I don't know. I mean, this is, again, some of the inconsistencies that arose out of the statement. The first time I had an opportunity, by the way, to write a comprehensive statement was for the Commission.
No, this is a comprehensive statement. It runs single spacing over some four pages.
And that was
comprehensive.
That was certainly not written by me.
But you read it, and it was issued under your name to the Public Protector. And aspects of her report, that's the genesis of this commission, are based on what's contained in this statement. Like, for instance, Mr. Zuma and Mr. Shlongwane driving you to the airport.
I confirmed that I was not driven by Fana and Duduzane. I was driven by somebody else to the airport.
The question, Mr. Jonas, you would of course know that I ask you, which sits at the bottom of all of these questions, is how is it possible for a deputy minister to have a statement issued about something so sensitive and so important, containing such gross factual errors?
Again, I mean, the fact that I didn't sign the statement, quite frankly, the statement was read to me, and I never signed the statement. And if there was my signature attached, I'm sure you have something different.
Yes.
In the Public Protector interview, I was more detailed to some extent, but in my statement, I had an opportunity to the Commission. I had an opportunity to do a full statement, conscious of its consequences.
One or two quick points after this, please. If you just turn a few pages, let me just make doubly sure it's in the same bundle. C1, page 87. Just have a quick look there.
What page is that?
87.
87.
Yeah, 87.
Okay. Thank you.
Do you have it?
Yeah.
Good. There you will see, this is now part of the interview that you had with the Public Protector, and you give an answer that commences on page 86. I just want to double check. I'm talking about the Koki pen numbered numbers, not the printed numbers. You've got it?
Yeah.
So the previous page, you start with giving an answer, and you deal with all sorts of general aspects, but what I'm really interested in is at page 87, just at the end of that first paragraph, you say, it actually convinced me very strongly that actually if we think we are far from the mafia still, we are kind of fooling ourselves. That is what we have. So that is why I mean, for me, the thing about going public, and this is the important bit I'm asking you about. So that is why I mean, for me, the thing about going to the public or going to public and saying this thing out there and so on, to be honest, I mean, were it not for the leakages, I would not even have bothered. I would have found some other means of excluding myself from the whole thing. Could I ask you, why do we find such a long period of time after the October event and the first time you mentioned this, other than to the two ministers of finance, Nene and Gordhan, as you've explained, and in the manner that you've explained? Why such a long time? Why don't you make any mention of it to the police? Why don't you lay a charge? Nothing.
Look, I had...
I'm sorry, Mr. Law, I just want to make sure I follow the question.
The question is
Is
why...
the question about why he didn't tell anybody about the incident?
Other than the two ministers.
Other than the two ministers?
Yes.
Okay, all right, thank you.
And specifically, just to cut things to the chase, why did you not lay a charge?
Again, I mean, I explained this in my affidavit quite extensively. I mean...
No, we've read it, but I would like to hear now what you say.
And I think my argument is that the situation at the time was very hostile. It was so hostile that you hardly trusted the police. I never trusted the police. I didn't trust the Hawks. I didn't even trust the intelligence. And in fact, I mean, themselves, I mean, in the meeting, they made it very clear they are in control of all those structures. And by the way, I believe them. And all evidence shows now that that was not far from truth. I mean, you have now in the latest, the report from intelligence that confirms that. The only reason why I actually communicated to Nene and Praveen, it was because I talked to Tuli, by the way. I thought when we think that maybe a time when...
No, I hear that answer, but we now know that there was a threat to kill you. Now, that's serious.
That even makes it more serious not
And
to talk about it.
So I apologize, I interrupted you. Go on.
I'm saying the fact that there were even threats made it even more serious not to talk about it.
So this more serious the less you talk out.
Yeah, many people are not coming to the commission, by the way. The only reason why they're not coming to the commission is better to keep quiet.
Who are they? Do you have names?
There are
Or
many
can you
people,
give names? Can you
there are
provide
many people
names?
who could have come. I know, for instance, talking to Mbalula, I know that his biggest fear was if he comes here, he will be ridiculed and many things will happen. But the reality of the matter, there are lots of people in government and in politics who would see things and rather opt to keep quiet.
Let me... I mean, that statement is so vague that I really cannot test it. Let us just move to the things that we indeed can test. You stated to the public protector that you would have found other means of excluding yourself. In other words, not being associated with this whole affair. That's what you wanted to do, is that correct?
Two things. I mean, excluding meant that I even considered resigning at the time, and the second one was thinking that I move as far away from these fellows.
No, that's not what it means. Look, I'm not going to, we don't have time for me to do a proper textual analysis and to deal with your answer on that basis. Let's just move on. What we do know is that there was a story that was later published, and that's March of 2016. Now remember, all of this that we discussed now happened in October 2015. You then had the Nene Gate debacle in December of that same year. And about 3 months later, in March, there was first the Financial Times that published the story in London, and we know it was then picked up by the South African press and eventually published in the Sunday Times in South Africa in March. Is that correct?
Yes.
Could I ask you, you had spoken only to the two ministers about what had happened. Where did the leak come from?
You could, I don't know, you could tell me if you could.
No, it's quite important because the public protector also asked you. Did you not tell anybody else?
No, I didn't tell anybody else.
Not a single person?
Look, afterwards, I did tell Zweli Mkhize.
No, I know, we know about that.
At the time...
I'm excluding that from my question.
At the time, I haven't communicated with
Because
anyone.
you spoke to Mr. Mkhize after publication in the newspapers to understand how the ANC was going to deal with the matter. Is that correct?
Yes, I did.
I'm excluding that because it happened in any event after the newspaper articles had been published. Yet the question remains, where did the leak come from if you told nobody else?
I do not know. I would not even...
So it must be one of those two ministers?
No, I wouldn't say that. I know they wouldn't do it. It could as well be the Guptas.
Oh, it could have as well have been the Guptas who said that they offered you a position committing all sorts of crimes.
It could have been anyone associated with them anyway.
All right. Now, Mr. Jonas, can we then quickly move on? Because you then made a statement dealing with this matter, and that was made only after publication in the newspapers. And then the whole thing got momentum. It led to the the Public Protector's inquiry and the events that happened after that. All right. I would like to ask you about one aspect that you touched upon this morning in your evidence, the further evidence, and that was the police interaction between yourself and those you did not trust in the police. Now, let me ask you, your mistrust in the police, was that for the whole institution from top to bottom?
I had complete mistrust at the time, yes.
From the minister down to the lowest constable?
Yes, I did.
Good. Then, if I may ask you just quickly the following. In your statement to the Commission at page 19, could you please look, this will be the document called C1, I think it's in the same bundle, if you just go back, page 19.
Cocky pen 19.
Yeah, 19, Cocky pen 19. Do you have it?
Yeah.
In paragraph 56, at the end of that paragraph, you say, on 19 July 2016, I provided the Hawks with a short affidavit confirming the content of the media statement which I had made on 16 March 2016. You see that?
Yeah.
Do you have a copy of that statement?
Yes, I do.
Did you provide that to the Commission?
It should have been provided. If it was not, that would be, I know they should have.
I'm certain that if you provide it to the, that the Commission might require that from you, because we've not seen it anywhere in the bundles of documents. Okay. The second one is, if you just go down paragraph 57, and then there you speak about, I accordingly provided a supplementary affidavit that signed on 2 May 2017. See that? Paragraph 57 on page 19. A supplementary affidavit. Yeah. And then it says it contains a number of statements and so forth. That statement we also do not find in the papers. Did you provide that affidavit? I apologize, it's a supplementary affidavit.
It should be with the...
It should be with the Commission.
Yeah.
All right. And if it isn't, then you will be prepared to give a copy of it to the Commission.
Yes, I will.
Of course. Right. Now, the point here is that you found yourself, apart from my client, Mr. Zuma, and the Guptas, for whom I do not appear, in a further bit of a dispute insofar as the events that led up to the Commission is concerned. And that was with the police itself.
Yeah.
Do you recall that? So I'm going to ask you some questions about your interaction with 3 generals, Munonopi, Matakata, and Tlemeza. Do you recall that? These 3 people are mentioned in...
I know the names.
You know the names?
About the interaction.
Yes. All right. Let us just quickly see what they say, because you have not been asked to provide comments on what these 3 generals say in their affidavits. Now, this time I'm going to ask you to turn, please, to the bundle that's marked Exhibit D, D3. Right. The first affidavit is the one of General Munonopi. You see that at page 75. Did you see it?
75.
Once again, the one that's written in manuscript, the Koki pen number. Yeah. Have it.
You said page 75.
Page 75.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, do you have it, Mr. Jonas?
Yeah.
Okay. Just very quickly, the statement, it's an affidavit telling us that the person is a Major General in the police, Director of Priority Crime Investigation, and then attached to the component serious corruption investigation. And then what I want to ask you about, really just to save time, if I may take you, paragraph 3 just explains what the issue is about. And I think really I must march on and ask you to turn to page 76. The issue here concerns that these very senior police officials, this one is the first one we're looking at, complained that they had to go through a process of extraction to try and get anything from you, any response from you about the allegations.
I probably could respond to it in better details, but let me summarize, what happened. Firstly, most of the numbers that are said to have been my numbers where they were contacting me are incorrect. They are not my numbers to start with.
Sorry, did you say that anywhere else, in any affidavit?
But we only saw this affidavit. We never got a sign. My understanding is that even Nonopi retracted the affidavit. That's my understanding, that she retracted the affidavit. So I don't even understand why we should make it subject of the cross-examination. But let me explain what happened in this instance. I had a call from General Nhlanhla to say that they would want to finalize the case on the Guptas. And we must meet. We're arranging a meeting with me. A couple of weeks passed, and then I got a call from him again to say the matter has been handed over to, I don't remember the role of Mrs. Mnonopi, to handle the matter. A few days after that, Mrs. Mnonopi did call and arranged a meeting. And that meeting did take place. And by the way, when she said she called for the meeting, she said, listen, I just want to close the matter. And I've prepared a statement for you to that effect. And I contacted my lawyer to say, listen, I've just had a conversation with this General Mnonopi. Can you quickly, can you come to the office because she's on her way? And on her arrival in the office, indeed, she had a statement, but there was no docket. And we requested, we sat and looked at the statement, but we said, but you cannot give us a statement without a docket. She said, give me a few minutes, I'm going to go and fetch the docket. She left the office for, if I'm right, an hour or so, I'm not sure. And I was thinking that maybe it's like she won't come back. She came back with a file. And my lawyer went through the file and then said to her, okay, you can give me the statement so that we peruse it. And we'll give you a signed one if we agree with the content. And that's what exactly happened.
All right. Let us just look what I wanted to show you at page 76. Just a few statements over here. This is an affidavit. And paragraph 53.2 at the foot of that page, 76. It says the following. I deny, that's now in answer to the allegation that you made, that I subsequently and initially approached Mr. Jonas on 20 June 2016. Now, that was the date that I think you had the discussion with General Lemeza. Is that correct? In June?
I'm not sure. I must say I'm not sure.
Once again, forgive me, I'm not going to debate dates with you. We've got to move on. But the important thing is that she says, I, in fact, started to call Mr. Jonas on the 11th of April 2016 at 15:02 to request him to tender a sworn statement as a consequence of his media statement and pending cases culminating in the complaints laid by Mr. Bloem and Mr. Mania. And then she says, I humbly attach my call records. Did you or did you not receive a call from her in April 2016?
The call I received from Mrs. Mnonopi, the first call was about saying she is leading the investigation. The second call was about let's meet and go through this.
So this is, you say that this is a lie?
And some of the, I don't know, it's a pity that these dates, these numbers here are not clear. But I looked at previously at some of the numbers. They were not even my numbers, by the way. And by the way, most of them, if you look at the time, it shows you that it was not necessarily a call. I mean, quite frankly, when you go through the long list, it's not even a call. So it's not my, most of them, it's not my number. And secondly, I don't know, if you buzz a person for a second and you say you had a call.
And once again, the itemized billing you see at page 78, showing the numbers that she called, but let's go on. At page 80, there is a print of...
Page 80.
80.
Okay.
Maybe, Mr. Law, let me just have this clarified. Mr. Jonas, when Mr. Law began to ask you questions on this affidavit by Major General Nonopi, you said something that I understood to be that she had extracted or withdrawn the affidavit. Did I understand that correctly?
That was my understanding, Chair. I don't know, unless I have the wrong understanding.
Your understanding was based on what? I just don't have. I just want
There
to
was a
make
public statement, I think I read somewhere, where it was said that she's retracted the statement. She's going a different route. I'm not sure. We can ask the Commission.
You are not sure. Let me ask Mr. Mkwena if he knows anything, just so that we, as we proceed, we know what the status of the affidavit is.
He withdrew his application before this commission to cross-examine, so we never even dealt with it.
Okay,
yes.
no, that I do know. That I do know. Okay, so if what Mr. Mkwena is saying is what may have given you the impression that she had withdrawn the affidavit, I think what the position is that she filed an application for leave to cross-examine you, but subsequently withdrew the application, which doesn't necessarily mean she no longer stands by what she said in the affidavit.
Okay.
Okay, all right.
Mr. Chairman, I'm indebted to you. Mr. Jonas, let's just tiptoe on. If you can then look at page 80. This is what the witness stated on oath, is what was sent to you. Good day, Honourable DM, Deputy Minister, I take it. Hope the DM is doing well. My apologies, DM, I know you've got a very busy schedule. I'm Major General Mnonopi, head of serious corruption investigation, and she goes on to explain who she is. I wish to have a word with the DM as I'm investigating 2 cases where the DM is cited as a key witness. I tried to call the DM on numerous occasions with no success. Would appreciate a call from the DM so as to take the matter further. Hope to hear from the DM soon with regards, and then it's Major General Mnonopi. 21 April 2016. Did you or did you not receive this?
I don't recall receiving
You don't
the
recall,
message.
but
The one message I received, again, I mean, it would be nice to know the number to which this message was sent. But in any case, it could be the message, but the message I received, I responded promptly to it. And that's what necessitated a meeting that we had. And that was only one meeting.
Do you recall whether you may have received only one SMS from her or 2, or is it a number of them?
I can't recall.
You can't recall.
Chair,
But from your side, in terms of responding to her by way of SMS, do you recall that maybe you might
No,
have
I never.
responded?
I called her.
You
We had a
called her,
conversation
yes,
on the phone.
yes,
Following the
yes,
conversation,
yes,
we had a meeting, and that
yes.
was the meeting where he was trying to
Yeah.
basically persuade us to sign a statement that we didn't write.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Page 83, if you quickly move there. I just want to ask you about the sequence of events, very quickly through this. This is now an affidavit from Lieutenant General, this time, Matakata. You see that?
Yeah.
Have you seen this affidavit before?
Yes, I did.
She says the following in paragraph 3 of that affidavit at page 83. I can recall being in a meeting, she's not sure of the exact date and time, with Lieutenant General Nhlanhla and Major General Mnonopi. At the meeting, Major General Mnonopi reported to General Nhlanhla that she has been unsuccessful in obtaining a statement from the former Deputy Minister, that's yourself. It goes on in 4. Lieutenant General Nhlanhla then called the former Deputy twice. In my presence, I recall that the former Deputy Minister indicated he could not submit the statement as he was not the complainant in the matter. And then it goes on. Further, he did not open any case and was not a witness. Mr. Jonas, therefore, was asking why the DPCI was looking for him. Lieutenant General Nhlanhla explained to him that he is the witness in the matter, and it goes on like that. And if you cross the page 84, at both instances, Lieutenant General Nhlanhla called the Deputy Minister and put him on speaker, hence I could hear the utterances. Now, the point that is of some consequence is only this. She records in this affidavit that you said you would not open a case, you did not open a case, I apologize, you did not open a case, you were not a witness, and therefore you were, why give a statement if you're neither a witness and you did not open the case? That is what is recorded over here.
That's incorrect.
So that's a lie.
That's incorrect.
A lie or incorrect?
It is completely incorrect. I recall the conversation with General Nhlanhla.
And what did you say to him?
The conversation was about, he said to me, there is a case. And he didn't explain what it is about. I asked, what about? He said, the Guptas. I asked him, am I a complainant or am I a witness? He said, that depends on what you're going to say. And we then said, let's arrange a meeting. And so that I can actually, if I need to make a statement, I do make a statement. And later, by the way, he phoned, I think, 2 times after that. And that's when he told me that Lieutenant Nonopi would be the person that deals with the matter.
Right. Then, if I may ask you, if you can go to page 84. Paragraph 5. At the last conversation, when Lieutenant General Nhlanhla and Mr. Jonas, myself, Major General Munonopi, and Lieutenant General Nhlanhla were in a meeting in General Nhlanhla's boardroom, long sentence, Mr. Jonas promised to come to the office in order for the affidavit to be obtained. Lieutenant, is that incorrect?
That's untrue.
Once again, it's not just a misunderstanding, it must be a positive lie. Is that so?
Look, I didn't, my issue was about that. I think the next discussion we had was that the matter has been handed over to General Munonopi. And from now on, I will be dealing with General Munonopi. That was my last discussion with General Nhlanhla.
All right, it goes on.
After that.
Mr. Law, I just want to mention that I think we have taken about 50 minutes, but I'm not stopping you now. You have been using the time properly, so I'll give you a little bit more time to try and wrap up.
It's truly indebted,
okay.
Mr. Commissioner. Right, it just goes on like that, and it ends off with this pithy statement that never mind the arrangements that had been made, Mr. Jonas never came. And you say that's nonsense? You were never asked to come.
I was never asked to come to the office.
If you then turn the page to 85, now to see what the date of this document is, we've got to turn to 86, where you will see the date as 28 March 2017. Do you see it?
Yeah.
Right. This is now addressed by by General Nhlanhla, and this, alarmingly, is addressed to the Speaker of the House of Assembly. Do you see it?
Yes, I did.
Do you have any memory of this document?
It was never presented to me.
Never presented. Well, it makes for quite interesting reading, and I am just going to read paragraph 3 because it's incredible. The identified non-cooperation that's now with yourself is now leading the investigation team to believe that the Honourable Member of Parliament, as a witness to this matter, is found to be deliberately distorting and willingly failing himself to withstand his responsibilities of both public and private citizenship in circumstances of these compliances. You say you never saw this?
I never saw this, so
right.
I cannot hardly respond to it.
Right, we can, I certainly cannot put it to you that, because I'm not appearing for those people, that it was sent to any specific address, but you deny that you even received this document.
No, I didn't receive this.
Right. Then, just to end off this aspect, the version of the police officials, if I correctly understand it, is that flowing from what you had said to General Nhlanhla on the phone, namely that you are not a witness and you're not a complainant. A statement was then prepared in precisely those terms. If I may ask you, perhaps, if I think I might have, yes, page 122 in the same bundle. Just look at that.
Page 122.
Page 122, just to double check, this is in bundle C1.
See.
C1.
On my bundle, page 122 seems to be part of an affidavit or statement by Mr. Ajay Gupta.
C.
Oh, C.
C, I apologize.
Okay.
Did I say D? I apologize if I said D.
Okay. Thank you.
Page 122. Mr. Jonas, just to place this in context, is this the statement that the police prepared on your behalf?
I assume it is. I would assume it is. It looks like it.
Please, I can tell you that it is an annexure to, I think, to double check your statement. I've got so many. Really, I cannot go into the detail of how this whole thing came about, but if I correctly understand the position in the papers, this is what the statement was that was prepared by the police for
In general, the line seems to be the same. I mean, the one was, yeah, it looks like the same.
It looks like the same.
Yeah.
The one that you wouldn't sign.
Yes.
Because all I want to direct your attention to at page 122, it is the second last paragraph, is where you said the following, no, not you said, apologize, but it was said that you would say, during our engagement, she informed me that I'm cited as a witness in both cases, and for that reason, a detailed statement is required from me. And here's the bit. I responded to her that I'm not prepared to submit any statement as I never opened any case against anyone, and I don't intend opening any further. I'm not a witness to any person. In other words, non-committal. You do not want to make a statement.
This was a statement prepared by General
Yes.
Nonopi, and all of this thing that she talks about never happened. I mean, so in any case, why would I have signed something that is false? I never had a meeting. I never had this discussion that is captured in this paragraph with her. And by the way, it was preceded by a detailed discussion where she was telling us that we cannot assist the DA and the COPE on this matter. We have to kind of kick it out.
Leave that aside. What we do know is that General Matakata, at page 83, made an affidavit where precisely the contents that I now read to you, she says, rightly or wrongly, is what you said over the phone. And you say that's wrong.
That's wrong. I didn't say
It's not just a misremembering or a misstatement, it's a positive lie.
I didn't remember saying that. I didn't say that.
Mr. Chairman, my predicament is I could go on for a day or more. But if this is my time, it's about as good a time to stop.
Well, the idea is to try and strike a balance. One has got to be fair to your client and all implicated persons, but at the same time, look at the fact that we shouldn't take too long.
Yes.
So that's part of the reason why I didn't stop you at the time that I had indicated. So in terms of important things that you want to cover, much time do you think you still need?
Chair, my difficulty is if I get into any of the detailed aspects, as it is with any examination like that, we have to go to one page, keep a finger and go to another page, compare them.
Yes.
This is a fairly lengthy exercise, and I think, if I may just perhaps confirm with Nhlanhla Jr.
Yeah.
I'm just taking a quick instruction to make sure
that's fine. That's fine. That's fine.
Mr. Chairman, on the understanding that we could perhaps provide you, because you are the chief inquisitor in this case, with a list of matters that we find to be contradictive and indicative of Mr. Jonas's version not being correct, and in due course asking you when Mr. Zuma testifies to look carefully at what he has to say, and that is at variance with this witness. Mr. Chairman, that is all I can then do in the allocated time.
No, certainly I would welcome that. But I'm happy that you check with your team if, in terms of what you have covered, I think you were taking instructions or whatever. I'm keen to make sure that at least important issues, the rest, the suggestion you make, I think is an important suggestion, because again, the legal team of the Commission, they are not pushing for a particular version. They look at all versions and they'll put questions. So the suggestion you make is most welcome. But I just want to check whether, subject to that, you are okay, or whether you need a little bit more time.
Chair, I would like more time, but it's going to be exactly the same thing in 15, 20, half an hour.
Okay.
So I think on the understanding that perhaps you can furnish our learned colleagues with in writing what we believe to be indicative of Mr. Jonas's version being incorrect on the essential points. I think, if I may then at this point end the cross-examination.
Okay, no, that's fine. And once again, the suggestion you make is most welcome. Let's do that. Send whatever document you may send that would point to certain issues or contradictions or other material that you think need to be looked at, and certainly I will look at it.
Of course.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, but thank you very much. Mr.
Chair, Mr. Tringrove would wish to re-examine.
Okay, that's fine. I didn't determine any time before, and I think I should determine it now. How much do you suggest, Mr.?
I'll be
10 minutes?
10 minutes.
10 minutes, okay. No, thank you. Yes, you may proceed.
Mr. Jonas, on the issue before the tribunal, the difference between you and Mr. Zuma is extremely narrow. You understand that?
Yeah. Yes, I do.
In fact, it is common cause that the two of you met at the Hyatt. Common cause that you went to the Gupta house.
Yes, it is.
Common cause that Finance Minister was at the Gupta house.
It is.
Common cause that there was, on occasion at least, a Gupta brother.
Yes.
The only difference between you is what happened at the Gupta house.
Yes, it is.
And you will have noticed that that's the one thing that my learned friend didn't canvass in cross-examination.
Yes, it is.
Everything except what happened at the Gupta house.
Yes.
So I would like to deal with that issue. The version of Mr. Zuma that has been put to you. That version is that the whole purpose of the meeting and the only topic of discussion at the meeting was rumors that Mr. Hlongwane had blackmailed you or had tried to blackmail you.
That's correct.
Now,
Please raise your voice again.
That's correct.
Mr. Jonas.
now, has he ever blackmailed you?
No, it hasn't.
Have you ever accused him of blackmail?
No, I didn't.
Have you ever heard of any rumors to that effect?
No, I didn't.
So if anybody said to you, Mr. Jonas, we hear rumors that you complained that Finance Hlongwane had tried to blackmail you, what would your response have been?
That is nonsense.
Would it have required more than a 1-minute discussion to resolve the issue?
Probably even a phone call.
Yeah. And before this meeting on the 23rd, when last had you spoken to Mr. Hlongwane?
In 2 days or 1 day before.
On the
And
telephone?
that morning, I think.
On the telephone or
On
in
the
person?
telephone. And we met a week or two so before.
And at that time, did he say anything at all about these rumors?
No, there was nothing about the rumors.
Was there any tension or hostility between the two of you?
It was the friendly meeting.
If he was looking for an occasion to discuss that kind of rumors with you, was there any reason for him not to do so in that conversation?
No, he would have directly spoken to me, particularly because I didn't even know how to do Sandy from a bar of soap, actually.
Now, and what's more, they then tell us that at this meeting at the Gupta house, nothing else was discussed except for this alleged blackmail rumor. Can I ask you to go to Mr. Zuma's statement at page 172 in paragraph 6?
Which is,
Which exhibit is it? Is it C1? D3.
D3, yeah.
And what's the page number?
172.
Thank you.
Are you there? At the foot of the page in paragraph 6, we will see, he says in the third line, rumors were surfacing in general that Mr. Jonas allegedly claimed that Mr. Hlongwane blackmailed him, Jonas, in some or other manner. These rumors were regarded as very serious. Paragraph 7, when these rumors started to surface, Mr. Hlongwane, in discussion with me, decided to set up a meeting with Mr. Jonas in an attempt to clear it up. And then the part that I'd like to emphasize. As Mr. Jonas, also in his discussions with Mr. Hlongwane, wanted to know from me directly where these rumors were spreading or coming from. You see that sentence?
yes, I did.
So he says that not only did you wanted to know where these rumors were coming from, and you had raised that question, not only in your discussions with Mr. Zuma, but also in your discussions with Mr. Hlongwane. Did you see that?
I see that.
Is there any truth to that statement whatsoever?
It's completely untrue.
And if either of them had raised it with you, what would your response have been?
I would have told them that it's nonsense, basically.
Then please go to his account of what happened at the meeting at page 174 in paragraph 14. He says, my observations during the meeting was that both Mr. Jonas and Mr. Hlongwane ventilated and discussed the rumors of the blackmail allegations. Any truth to that?
Untrue again. It's false.
Was there anything to discuss?
There was nothing to discuss. It was even mentioned
And
by
look,
the...
it goes further. Not only was it discussed, he says, and eventually reached a stage where, although it was not fully resolved, the dust settled between them, so to speak, and they agreed that should any further issues arise, that they would arrange further follow-up meetings in that regard. According to my assessment of the meeting, the issue between Mr. Nhlanhla and Mr. Jonas was not entirely resolved, but hanged in the air for further follow-up meetings. I do not know whether or not the dispute between them regarding the claims of alleged blackmail was ever resolved. Any truth to that?
No truth.
So not only does he say that these blackmail allegations were resolved, but there was still an issue between you and Mr. Nhlanhla causing hostility and tension, and the issue was not fully resolved. Any truth to that?
No truth at all.
You will have noticed that that was not canvassed with you in cross-examination.
I did notice.
At all. As for the Gupta version, we've heard the version of two Gupta brothers was put to you as to what happened at the meeting. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do.
Do you remember that the Gupta family issued a public statement at the time when your accusation became public?
Yes, they did.
And what did they say at the time
They
about the accusation that they had offered you a bribe at a meeting at their house?
The statement was that the meeting never happened. I was lying.
Can I refer you to a copy of the statement, please? Can I put this copy of the statement before you? I only have 2 copies, Chair. So okay. Yeah, will you hand one to the Chair? You'll see that's a public statement issued by Oak Bay on behalf of the Gupta family, but let's just take it from the top. It's on an Oak Bay letterhead. It says, Mcebisi, Jonas.
Mr. Trengov, maybe we should mark this document now. Yesterday, Mr. Pretorius put up a document and we forgot what it should be marked.
Certainly, shall be.
Mr. Mkwena might be helpful.
C2. My learned friend suggests C2, Chair.
C2, Exhibit C2.
Yeah.
Okay. This will be marked Exhibit C2, and that is a document marked News and Analysis, Oak Bay Investments Pty Limited. That is Jonas. There was no meeting, Gupta family. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So you'll see it says Mcebisi, Jonas. There was no meeting, Gupta family. That's the gist of what you say they said at the time. Yes. Don't put it aside yet. I want to take you through other parts of it. You'll see it's dated the 13th of March 2016. And then it says it is a statement from Oak Bay Investments on behalf of the Gupta family. So that was made on behalf of Mr. A.J. Gupta and Mr. Rajesh Gupta, amongst others.
Yeah.
And it recounts the accusation, and then in the middle of the page, there's a very short paragraph which says, to be absolutely clear, there was no meeting at all. Do you see that? Will you answer audibly, Mr. Jonas?
Yeah.
The machine doesn't pick up your nod.
Yes, I can see that.
Yeah. And then my learned friend put to you the account of various members of the Hawks, including that of General Nhlanhla, correct?
Yeah, correct.
He was the head of the Hawks at the time.
He was the head of the Hawks.
He's also the man whose appointment as head of the Hawks was set aside by the Supreme Court of Appeal.
That's
because
correct.
he had committed perjury in a High Court case.
That's correct.
He was also said to be behind the disastrous prosecution of Minister Gordhan.
That's correct.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Trengov. Mr. Jonas, prior to the meeting with Mr. Duduzane Zuma at the Hyatt Hotel and later at the Gupta residence, do you recall about how many conversations on the phone you had with Mr. Duduzane Zuma? There was the one on the day you came back from, is it Luanda?
There were quite a couple, I mean, not too much, but quite a couple.
Sorry?
It was not many, Chair. I mean, there were
Yes.
quite a couple, though.
Quite a couple of
Yeah.
them. Yeah, I was trying to have a look earlier on. It seemed that in your statement, at least those that I could see, apart from the one that we dealt with earlier on, that there may have been another one on the 19th of October. Of course, your meeting was on the 23rd of October. You both exchanged SMSs, and then there were some telephone or cell phone conversations as well. So you say it was a couple, but you
A couple
don't...
and a lot of missed calls.
Yes. Okay, all right. Thank you. Mr. Mkwena?
Mr. Chair, I have no questions for Mr. Jonas.
Yes. Okay, all right. Thank you. What is the situation with regard to Mr. Hlongwana's legal team?
Mr. Chair, I beg leave to hand correspondence which was handed to me during the tea adjournment. It might at least give us an indication as to what transpired. You'd see, Chair, that the first letter, which was written to Mr. Fana Hlongwani's attorneys, Strom voucher, it's dated the 28th of January 2019.
Well, it's addressed to Mr. Fana Hlongwane,
CO.
but it says, Dear Mr. Fouché.
Yes.
So it's addressed to Mr. Fana Hlongwane, care of Strom Fouché Incorporated.
Because
Yes.
they've placed themselves on record as the attorneys for Mr. Fana Hlongwane.
Yeah, but it's strange to address it to the client.
It's very strange, but
Anyway,
Mr.
okay.
Mabunda did that.
Yeah.
And you'll see that in paragraph 2, then there are dates which were proposed for Mr. Jonas to complete his evidence and to be cross-examined. And the 3 dates are finished in paragraph 2.1, 2.2, and 2.3.
Yes.
And they were indicated to choose one and to liaise in order to synchronize the diaries with all the respective parties.
Yes.
The second letter, Mr. Chair, you'll see if immediately after that letter, you then find another letter addressed to, strangely as it may seem, to Mr. Fana Hlongwane, but care of his his attorneys, dated the same day, where there was a correction of the date. You'll see that on paragraph 3, it says that kindly substitute this date for the 15th of March 2019. The remainder of the letter remains valid.
Yes.
So this is where they were informed about this date, but it does not end there.
The wrong date was 11 March.
It was
2019.
11 March, then it
Yeah.
was corrected to 15 March.
Okay.
So there's no ambiguity about the date as to when the matter will be proceeding to finalize Mr. Jonas's testimony. The last letter you will see, Mr. Chair, is the one dated the 30th of
2019.
January. And it says, I think it's quite important, paragraph 1, we refer to the above matter and in particular with our letter on even date. 2, we confirm that the legal representative of Mr. Duduzane Zuma, Ms. van der Merwe and van der Merwe have confirmed their availability on the 15th March 2019. 3, we further confirm that the date of the conclusion of the evidence and cross-examination of Mr. Jonas will be held on the 15th March 2019. We trust that you'll find the above in order. So
Yes.
there can never be doubt that there was communication that was directed to Mr. Nhlanhla Hlongwane's attorneys, and that the date was confirmed as early as the 30th of January 2019. That is as far as I can take the matter, Mr. Chair. As to why they're not here today, I don't have first-hand information.
Do we have any information, any proof how these letters were sent, whether they were sent as emails or whether they were just posted or faxed? We don't have that.
I don't have that, but one would assume that by seeing the attorneys of Mr. Duduzane Zuma here today and having not questioned any dates, and this was the last correspondence sent to all the parties, one would assume that it was also dispatched to the attorneys of Mr. Nhlanhla Hlongwane. If much more proof is required, we might just have to uplift from Mr. Mabunda the either emails confirming that they were received, or he can tell us by which mode were the letters directed to Mr. Nhlanhla Hlongwane's attorneys.
Okay, no, that's fine.
Yes.
I think, therefore, we'll need to release Mr. Jonas.
Yes.
And if and when another need arises for him to come back, we'll take it from there.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Jonas, thank you very much for coming to complete your evidence and for making yourself available for cross-examination. Mr. Hlongwane's lawyers are not here to cross-examine today. As you have heard, apparently correspondence was addressed to his attorneys notifying them about today. And if and when a need arises for you to be asked to come back, we will deal with it then. But thank you very much, and you are excused. Thank you. Yes, Mr. Mkwena.
Mr. Chair, that concludes
for today.
The proceedings for today.
Yes. All right. We will adjourn the proceedings for today until Monday, when we will begin with evidence relating to Daniel. For next week, we will be hearing evidence relating to Daniel. We adjourn.